Chapter 347. Meanwhile, in the faraway Daiyu state, a bloody storm had just subsided. The Long family had been overthrown. With Liku's testimony and material evidence, Gong Dai had uprooted them. After all, this was treason. Once they succeeded in killing the little princess, it was likely to cause a war between the two countries. Just this crime alone was enough to make the emperor furious. He directly put Long Xiangxiang under house arrest and handed the Long family over to Gong Dai to deal with. And the result was naturally to eliminate the source of the problem. Gong Dai was walking along the long waterside corridor when he suddenly stopped. Last time, he had poured out his heart to the royal sister here. He wondered how she was doing in Luyi. Now that he had signed an agreement with Yuheng and started to trade, it would not be long before the bank became the lifeline of the country. His power had once again expanded. Now that his people had gone to Yuqi, if he could join forces with Yuqi, then he would be the first person to open up a channel between the three countries. His shops would also be the first to openly enter another country. It has to be said that this was what Gong Yimo had in mind. But this was not what he wanted. The cool wind from the waterside pavilion blew, causing his eyebrows to wrinkle slightly. His long black robe was indescribably lonely. He wanted to be with the royal sister forever. He wanted the royal sister to not have anyone else in her eyes. The country, the people, there was only him. At this time, someone came up behind him. Gong Ju was alert. He turned around and saw Gong Che dressed in white with a fox fur coat draped over his shoulder. At this time, he was looking at the waterside pavilion outside the corridor, slightly lost in thought. After toppling the Long family, the Lu family took advantage of the opportunity to switch sides to the Crown Prince's camp. Only then did Lu Xianfei save herself from the fate of being killed by Gong Ju. Now, Lu Xianfei was afraid of Gong Ju. She was afraid that he would come to avenge his mother's death. It could be said that in the entire Daiyu state, there were only two powers, Gong Dai and Gong Che. Gong Dai had said that he had no intention of becoming the emperor. Logically speaking, there should not be any conflict between the two of them. However, they stood opposite each other, as if they were separated by an abyss of fury, so close yet so far apart. I heard that imperial brother is getting married. Congratulations. Gong Dai smiled faintly. His eyes were cold, and even when he smiled, there was a hint of perfunctoriness. Gong Che, on the other hand, seemed to be on the other end of the spectrum. His entire person exuded gentleness. At this moment, his hand reached out to the corridor, holding a branch of a plum tree. This flower was enchanting, and if it could be pinned to Immerse's hair, it would be wonderful. Wedding. Gong Che's face slowly brightened. It was unknown what he thought of, but his entire person was radiant. Last time, you told Imperial Father that if you married Lu Ye's most favored princess, he was afraid that your heart would change and you would covet something that didn't belong to you. Imperial Father believed you and didn't force you to marry the princess. Today, he is choosing a girl from a scholarly family of the right age for you. Gong Dai's face darkened. He really didn't say anything when he didn't see eye to eye with him. Therefore, he turned around to leave. There was still a large group of Long clan's women waiting to be dealt with in Zhao prison. The cries of these women were the most annoying. Wait! Gong Che suddenly called out to him. Gong Dai stopped, but he didn't turn around. Gong Dai, you and I both know that it is impossible for us not to marry. With our status, not marrying will only bring harm to her. In front of Gong Dai, Gong Che didn't need to pretend. He just loved Gong Yimo. He loved her to the point of humility. But he could pretend in front of Gong Yimo to get close to her, but he didn't want to pretend in front of his love rival. Gong Dai sneered, is that so? Gong Che took a step forward. As long as you don't marry, Imperial Father's suspicions on her will not disappear. Do you think that Imperial Father really didn't feel anything about the farce on the sky stairway last time? Gong Dai was silent. He naturally noticed this, and so did the royal sister. She was so anxious to leave and the emperor didn't stop her. It was all because of this. But what could he do? He just loved her. He just wanted her. He didn't want to marry. No one deserved to be connected to his name. He only belonged to the royal sister. Thinking like this, he didn't want to listen anymore. Gong Che wanted to protect the royal sister, that was his business. But marriage? He didn't agree. Don't you want to have her? Gong Dai stopped again because of Gong Che's words. He narrowed his eyes and couldn't leave anymore. He wanted the royal sister too much, so much that his heart ached. But on one hand, there was a barrier in her heart. On the other hand, she cared about what people said. It was so difficult to have her. Gong Che's chest rose and fell slightly. But he had already made up his mind. As long as he could have her, nothing else mattered. So he continued. Emmoor's nature is free and unrestrained. Although she's a girl, she has ambitions. More and more people will peep at her beauty and be subdued by her skirt. And you're so sure that she won't like any of them? Was he sure? Gong Dai's hands clenched into fists under his sleeves. He worked hard to become strong, just to be the most outstanding one. But, what if the royal sister fell in love with someone else in the process? No. He couldn't accept it. At that moment, Gong Dai's eyes flashed with deep hostility. Just thinking about it made him want to kill. Kill all the men who peeped at her. And Gong Che didn't feel good either. When they were young, Gong Dai went to Shizhou. He was the only one by Emmoor's side. She only had eyes for him. She lived in a place where he could touch her. Her ears were always filled with strange voices. But her growth was so fast, much faster than them, the so-called proud sons of heaven. He wanted to have her so much, but she was getting harder and harder to control. Now that she didn't have any romantic feelings for him, he could only endure it when he wanted to get close to her. If this went on, he could forget about having her for the rest of his life. What do you want? Gong Dai finally turned around. He wanted to hear what Gong Che wanted to do. Gong Che looked at him with a smile, but the tenderness in his eyes was a feeling that even he couldn't suppress. He endured too much and was too tired. He didn't expect that he could only completely relax in front of Gong Dai and express his naked feelings for Emmoor. It was heavy, sweet, and painful, but he was willing to do it. Now you are the most powerful prince in Daiyu State. I am also the crown prince who has won the hearts of the people. In the future, if you are willing, when I become the emperor, you can be the prince regent. Gong Dai didn't care about this. He only wanted to know what Gong Che wanted to do. Gong Che licked his lips. His eyes were filled with undisguised passion. Emmoor is already 17. She's a big girl now. His words touched Gong Dai's nerves. It made him feel more and more threatened. Gong Che looked at him and said slowly, but she is growing too fast. If you want to keep her, you and I can only work together. At this point, he bit his lip. He seemed to have made up his mind. If you are willing, why can't we have her together? Chapter 348. Gong Dai widened his eyes and frowned. You're crazy. After he finished speaking, he wanted to leave, but Gong Che's hearty laughter came from behind him. Yes. I'm crazy. Aren't you crazy? Falling in love with the sister who raised you, how are you any better than me? Gong Dai didn't want to listen anymore and continued to walk. Gong Dai. Gong Che stopped laughing and asked in a low voice, "Aren't you worried that you'll still be able to win her heart and dominate her line of sight?" "But what about me?" His voice turned sorrowful, reverberating through the long corridor as he wailed endlessly. "But what about me? I can't even express my feelings. If she doesn't accept me, will she accept you?" Wishful thinking. "She didn't treat you like how she treated me because you grew up with her and she couldn't bear to see you like that. Do you really think she's moved by you?" Gong Dai stood there with difficulty. He wanted to say that he and the royal sister's hearts were connected and that she was moved, but he didn't say it. Gong Dai had no confidence in Gong Yimo. Gong Che sneered. "If she really has you in her heart, why would she be so eager to go to Luyi? She's obviously hiding from you, but you don't know it. Stop talking." Gong Dai turned around angrily. "Put away your weird thoughts. I won't hurt her. Then we'll just wait like this." Gong Che smiled and didn't back down, but his tone gradually became sad. "Once I also thought that waiting would bring about results. I foolishly thought that since I loved her so much, she would at least be moved by my feelings and soften her heart a little, but she didn't." He gritted his teeth. "She's so cold to me, like a sharp knife cutting through a tangled Gordian knot. She doesn't give me a single thought. That's why there's no point in waiting." Gong Dai couldn't refute. Royal Sister had a strong defense in her heart, but he didn't know why. "Only plunder," Gong Che suddenly said. He was originally gentle, but now his expression was dangerous and fanatical. He looked at Gong Dai. "As long as you and I work together, she can't leave us. I don't want to break her wings or hurt her, and all this won't be known by anyone, so we don't have to worry about gossip. As long as we work together." Gong Ju wanted to ridicule him and leave, but he stood there, unable to move a single step. "Don't you want to completely possess her?" Gong Che's bewitching voice rang out, "Openly soothe her skin and become one with her." His gaze became more and more fanatical. "We can build a big palace to hide her. No one will know our relationship, and there won't be any obstacles." At this point, he hardened his heart. "In fact, as long as you agree to work with me, I can even give her first time to you." A cold glint flashed in the depths of Gong Che's eyes. Yes, he could do this. But when the time was right, he would definitely kill Gong Dai. Mo only wanted him as a man, and that was enough. If he could get Mo none of this mattered, he could endure it. Ridiculous. Gong Che had gone crazy. Gong Dai frowned. He must be crazy to listen to such nonsense. Seeing Gong Dai leave again, Gong Che sneered. "I don't believe that you aren't afraid. Are you really that confident in yourself? Daiyu State, Yuheng, Luyi, Yuqi, and all the other small states. There are so many outstanding people in this world. Other than your childhood friendship with Mo, what do you have to keep her?" Gong Dai walked faster and faster, wanting to leave Gong Che behind. But his martial arts skills were high, and Gong Che's soft voice entered his ears like thunder. "When the time comes and she chooses someone else, even if you regret it, what can you do? Gong Dai, why don't you think about it carefully? This suggestion is still valid." "Crazy." Gong Dai closed his eyes and threw his voice out of his mind. He wouldn't hurt Royal Sister. He believed that he would become the most outstanding man, and become the only choice for Royal Sister. What if she fell in love with someone else in the process? Even if that person wasn't that outstanding, who could say for sure? A ghostly voice suddenly appeared in his mind. Just thinking about it made it hard for him to control his desire to kill Royal Sister. No. He wanted to see her. He wanted to stay by her side. She could only have him in her eyes. She couldn't like anyone else other than him. Gong Dai couldn't imagine what it would be like if Gong Yimo disappeared from his world. He couldn't accept any accidents. Gong Yimo felt strange in her heart. She was a little uneasy. She shook her head. In her hand was an agricultural encyclopedia. Next to her hand were a few things that were originally gray, but were now equivalent to treasures. Potatoes. She was ashamed to say that she had some fresh ingredients in her space, but not much. Other than potatoes, there were tomatoes, eggs, and chili. Fortunately, the space could keep them fresh, so there were no problems until now. The tomatoes had been eaten because they couldn't be planted, but potatoes were different. At that time, she resisted the urge to fry French fries and kept these fresh potatoes. She didn't expect that they would really come in handy. These things had tenacious vitality and were abundant. Liu Ye's geology was similar to Inner Mongolia in the future. The climate and soil in many places were suitable for growing potatoes. As she read, she felt lucky. If she didn't keep these potatoes, potatoes would only be introduced to the mainland after Columbus discovered South America. But now, she had brought this step forward by a full 7 centuries. If only there were corn, she thought greedily. In her heart, she put the matter of sailing to the sea on the agenda. She had the theory, but now she only needed to put it into practice. Because the potatoes were limited, and it wasn't even February yet, she had to consider the matter of greenhouse vegetables. There was a lot to do. On the other side, the matter of the horse ranch of the 3 kingdoms was also put on the agenda. Long Qing Wuji and his ministers were discussing the feasibility of this matter. But when Gong Yimo wanted to take over the post station of the horse ranch, it was unanimously opposed by everyone. King, I think this is a conspiracy. Hua Zhou Wuyo's father, Hua Zhou Yi, said. How can there be people from other countries in a country? Long Qing Wuji was very insistent on this matter. Regarding this matter, there is no need to mention it again. This king has already promised Gu country's princess. Moreover, there are merchants from other countries in our country. This will be the trend in the future. Hua Zhou Yi was still a little unhappy. We shouldn't let a woman take the initiative. How much benefit would there be in this? Letting an outsider take advantage of it. Long Qing Wuji sneered. Do you know how much trouble she, a woman, has saved us? Daiyu State, Yuheng, Lu Yi, Daiyu State, needless to say, her words carry enormous weight. Even Yuheng, as long as it's her idea, no one will oppose it. Once trade is established, you all know how much benefit it will bring to Lu Yi. Moreover, she alone can deal with 2 countries, why can't she take the initiative? Chapter 349. Since Long Qinggu Ji had said so, Hua Zhou Yi did not say anything even if he was dissatisfied. His family was the main force of the horse ranch. Once the 3 Kingdoms horse ranch was established, the relay station in the horse ranch would be a big source of income. Originally, the horse ranch and relay station belonged to his family. Now that the relay station was given to an outsider, he was really unhappy. His eyes turned. If the king did not work, could he start with Gong Yimo? After the court meeting, Long Qinggu Ji hurried to Gong Yimo's place. There was no other reason. Gong Yimo said that today, she would show him the thing that could solve Liu Ye's food problem. Did such a thing really exist? Long Qinggu Ji did not believe it, but he hoped it was true. The sky, it was snowing again. Liu Ye's snow was different from Daiyu State's snow. Daiyu State's snow disappeared as soon as it touched the ground, but Liu Ye's snow was much more tenacious. In a short while, the ground was covered in a layer of snow. Is what you said true? Long Qinggu Ji held a potato with both hands. That kind of careful feeling was like holding a piece of tofu. This thing, is it really abundant? Can it be eaten? Gong Yimo held a pen in her mouth and frowned at the pile of paper in front of her. She spoke with a lisp. Not only can it be eaten, it's also delicious. As she spoke, she glanced at him and took away the pen. She smiled mischievously. You have to be careful. I'm using this to make seeds. I only have 10 or 20 of them. It can be said that in the entire 4 kingdoms, there won't be any more of this. Spoiling one would be a great loss. She teased him like this, and Long Qingguji was shocked. He really treated the potato like a baby and gently placed it on the table. He felt that it was round, but he was still worried. He kept staring at it as if he was afraid that it would roll off. Gong Yimo was happy to see this, but she was not wrong. This was a foreign species, and there would not be any more of it on this continent. Then what do we do now? Long Qingguji did not understand farming. Do we plant seeds? Shall I fetch some farmers? Gong Yimo nodded. Farmers are needed. Find a few more. I don't know much about it, but this thing can only be planted in Luyi in April. I want to build a greenhouse first and cultivate more seeds. Long Qingguji nodded as if he understood. Nowadays, in Luyi, the staple food was millet. Because of the soil and climate here, many crops could not survive, so meat was still the dominant food. What else do you need? Long Qingguji remembered it carefully, because he didn't understand what Gong Yimo said, so he just listened obediently. I also need some animal skins, she said with some uncertainty. In order to ensure the temperature of germination, she had to use either a greenhouse or a greenhouse. Luyi didn't have something like an earth dragon, so she had to make a shed to ensure the temperature. After thinking about it, in a situation where there was no plastic, animal skin was the best choice. Moreover, it needed to be thinner and then pieced together. After hearing Gong Yimo's request, Long Qingguji didn't say anything and went to prepare the thing she wanted, and he was very fast. With the help of the whole city, he quickly pieced together a long piece of thin skin. A large part of it was fresh, but it had been treated with preservative, and it still had a fishy smell on it. In winter, food was precious. According to Gong Yimo's request, they killed so many animals to get their skins, and they had to be young animals to get their skins thin. It was really a very extravagant thing to do. It was not an exaggeration to say that the value of this large piece of skin was no less than the weight of gold. Gong Yimo took a look and nodded. The skin in her hand was thin and tough, so it should be enough. Some things were carried out in a hurry. She carefully selected suitable soil and moved it into a big tent. After a period of time, she cut the sprouted potatoes in her hand, smeared the ashes on them, and planted them with a sincere attitude. However, she was very careful and didn't plant them all at once. She placed half of the potatoes in a warm place and let them germinate naturally. Seeing how King Lu Yi and the noble princess from Dai Yu State treated the gray fruits like this, some of the farmers were very nervous. They repeatedly promised that they would take good care of them. However, Gong Yimo didn't listen to their words. She would come over often anyway. These were her children. Once they were grown, bringing them back to Dai Yu State would be a great thing. When she thought about how she could eat French fries and potato chips in the future, Gong Yimo started to drool. King Lu Yi was also very nervous, but when he saw that she was even more nervous than him, he couldn't help but smile. His heart warmed and he dragged her to drink. Actually, when he saw that Gong Yimo didn't eat or drink because of this matter, he wanted her to relax a little. Just like that, it was soon the new year. People were in high spirits when faced with happy events. This year, Lu Ye's new year would definitely be very lively. Longqing Wuji requested a large-scale celebration to celebrate everything going smoothly in the coming year. The whole city was cheering. Even the heavy snow couldn't cover the enthusiasm of the people. Because of the different customs, compared to Dai Yu State, it was a different kind of fun. Gong Yimo was absent-mindedly drinking in the palace. The surroundings were quiet. Everyone was celebrating. Meanwhile, she was reading a book. Her heart was still thinking about the sprouted potatoes. Those little sprouts. They were the only green in Lu Yi. When Longqing Wuji came in, he saw that she was deep in thought. He smiled and pulled her to dance. The cheering outside was so loud. Didn't she hear it at all? Gong Yimo quickly got up. Let's go together. You go play. I'll go take a look at my greenhouse. Longqing Wuji suddenly glared at her. He had to maintain his dignity. It was rare for him to show his emotions on his face. What are you looking at? You've already seen it twice in the day. You can't run away. Gong Yimo was thinking about it, but she replied vaguely. What do you know? What's there to see dancing outside? It's not as good as my little sprouts, let's go. Longqing Wuji was too lazy to talk nonsense with her. He directly dragged her away. Outside the palace was the most lively place in Huaqing. Because Longqing Wuji waved his hand and held a 3-day bonfire meat feast, many people rushed to Huaqing to enjoy this event. When Gong Yimo came out of the palace, she saw a huge bonfire that almost lit up the entire sky. The air was filled with the aroma of barbecued meat and wine. She had to admit that although Gong Dai used strong alcohol to attack Lu Ye's plot, this kind of distilled alcohol quickly became popular in Lu Yi. She tasted it. The taste was unbelievably strong. It was even harder to swallow than the burning knife she made herself. Gong Yimo was drowsy when Longqing Wuji forced her to drink a few cups. She knew that she couldn't go to the greenhouse to look at the sprouts. She could only helplessly sit by the bonfire and watch those people singing and dancing. She snorted proudly in her heart. Their dancing was so average. Such an ugly dance. She would rather look at her sprouts. Chapter 350. Commoners did not have any style when they danced, especially when they were all burly men. How beautiful could their dance be? Women, on the other hand, were even more unrestrained when they danced. Their waists twisted and turned, just like a snake showing itself. What they were eager to show was actually a kind of nature that allowed them to abandon themselves. Their hearts were free, and so was their dance. Gong Yimo was proud in her heart. While Longqing Wuji was surrounded by people, she found a corner and hid. Please don't let anyone ask her to dance such an ugly dance. She would not go. She wanted to be a quiet beauty. Princess. Do you want to dance? A beautiful girl with braids invited her warmly. They had all heard about Gong Yimo's actions during this period of time from the king. If a foreign girl could do her best for Lu Yi, why couldn't they do the same? After all, the result was not important. What was important was the thought. Gong Yimo looked at her exposed chest and waist, and her mouth twitched. Finally, she said a few words in a very arrogant tone. You guys go ahead. I'm thinking about some things. Hearing such a noble answer, the girl did not continue to pester her. She hurriedly said, Please think carefully. Then she walked away, as if she was afraid of disturbing her. Gong Yimo just let out a small sigh of relief. She would not go down and shake her hips. It was too shameful. She wanted to be a quiet beauty. You don't dare, right? Suddenly, a mischievous voice came from behind. Gong Yimo turned around and saw Longqing Wuji, who had shaken off the passionate commoners and was walking over. Seeing her hiding in the corner, he said with certainty. Don't dare. Gong Yimo exploded. She raised her chin. Is there anything in this world that I don't dare to do? Longqing Wuji smiled and sat down beside her. He tilted his head and looked at her. Then you don't. Gong Yimo was stunned for a moment. After a while, she said angrily, isn't it just shaking your hips? What's there to not know about such simple movements? I can do it after seeing it once. Then what are you waiting for? Let's go dance. With that, he pulled Gong Yimo and wanted to leave. Wait. Gong Yimo widened her beautiful eyes. I suddenly thought of a way to promote the growth of the seedlings. Longqing Wuji laughed out loud. Let's talk about it after the dance. As she spoke, she dragged Gong Yimo off the stage. Jump. Jump my ass. Gong Yimo stood there with a stiff expression. The honor of her Daiyu state did not allow her to do so. Longqing Wuji had one hand hooked onto someone else's arm, and the other hand hooked onto hers. Her other hand was passionately hooked onto by a beautiful girl, and she was forced to turn in circles. Many people were cheering at the side. The sound of percussion instruments and the melodious singing of a young girl could be heard, forming a scene of intertwining joy. And Gong Yimo was in the midst of it, like an alien. Kick. Longqing Wuji said with a smile. Kick your sister, I won't kick you. Gong Yimo looked at them coldly as they kicked their legs. She stood there with an attitude that said, you stupid mortals, this princess will never associate with you. Go in circles. Go in circles your sister. She would not twist her waist and turn in circles like this, it was too ugly. Gong Yimo did not cooperate, and Longqing Wuji laughed. He pulled on her hands and forced her to turn in circles. Gong Yimo's face turned red. Even under the light of the fire, it could be seen. Gong Yimo. You're scared. His hearty laughter mixed with the clapping of the others. The people actually formed a circle around them, and Longqing Wuji pulled Gong Yimo's hands and turned in circles. He was very fast. Gong Yimo's skirt fluttered around the bonfire, causing the crowd to cheer. Her face, on the other hand, was as red as a prawn. Mamma mia, can you not look at me anymore? Gong Yimo, your waist is still quite thin. Come, twist it a little. Just a little. Gong Yimo's face was already expressionless. Seeing that his evil hands wanted to twist her waist, she quickly dodged. But with this dodge, she fell into a group of women. Longqing Wuji's arrogant laughter could be heard in the chaos. If any of you can make her dance, this king will reward you greatly. The cheers of the young girls drowned out Gong Yimo's cries. Why did she have to dance in the crowd? Longqing Wuji, come, let's discuss. I'll dance for you alone, please let me off. But the young girl's enthusiasm was too much for Gong Yimo to resist. In the end, she was forced to dance in front of everyone with a face full of despair. She must have twisted her body in an unsightly manner. Don't you see how many people are laughing at her? Actually, they were not laughing at her, they really liked her. Daiyu State's dance was exquisite and dignified, while Lu Ye's dance was hot and casual. Gong Yimo was in the middle of it all and felt at a loss. But what she did not realize was that she was dancing faster and faster, and her face was gradually showing a smile. Actually, it was very simple. Longqing Wuji held a small drum in his hand and danced beside Gong Yimo. The more Gong Yimo danced, the more joyful she became. She was like a fairy on the dance floor, her every frown and smile was indescribably charming. The commoners were even more enthusiastic as they danced around the two of them. Their cheerful voices soared into the sky and melted the ice. In the dark, Longqing Ting Shui revealed a malicious smile and said to the girl beside her, Sister Wuyo, did you see that? Gong Yimo is a fairy. It's not enough that she seduced her own brother, now she's seducing her royal brother. Flower Boat Wuyo frowned as she looked at the lively crowd. The two people dancing around the drum. They had not known each other for long, but they were like a pair of jade. The man was handsome, the woman was beautiful. One was a proud son of heaven, and the other was a proud daughter of heaven. Although she could not see his expression, Longqing Wuji's laughter was so joyful. It was something that had never happened before. Brother Wuji. He really liked Gong Yimo. Perhaps he did not realize it himself. While she, the goddess, was pushed to the side without any place to stand. Longqing Ting Shui continued, "You are royal brother's fiancé, and Lu Ye's revered goddess." "What is she, Gong Yimo?" "As long as you go out, the commoners will all side with you. But since she overestimated herself, we should teach her a lesson." Flower Boat Wuyo glanced at Longqing Ting Shui. "Is it because you suffered in Gong Yimo's hands that you want to incite me to go against her?" Longqing Ting Shui, "I am not stupid." Longqing Ting Shui narrowed her eyes like a venomous snake staring at her. "Sister Wuyo, you are thinking too much. How could I use you? It's just that we have a common enemy. As long as you help me at the crucial moment, that will be enough." Flower Boat Wuyo looked at the crowd again. Over there, it was a lively event. Over here, it was bone-chillingly cold. After a while, she heard her own voice. Okay. Longqing Ting Shui was at least right about one thing. This was their common enemy. Chapter 351. Under Gong Yimo's careful and scientific management, the potatoes blossomed. She spent almost every day in the big tent, checking the data and observing the growth of the potatoes. These were the experiences she needed when she returned to Dai Yu State in the future. As for the matter of establishing the Three Kingdoms horse ranch, it was left to Longqing Wuji to handle. In any case, her letters had already been sent out. One was sent to Yuheng, while the other was sent to Daiyu. She believed that after Lu Yi agreed, the Three Kingdoms would be able to properly discuss the details. Gong Yimo's plan was successful, so she requested Longqing Wuji to be more generous and spread the news of the excellent horse breeds. At the very least, she wanted to ensure the quality of the horses in the 18 stud farms across the Three Kingdoms. It was a rather excessive request, but Longqing Wuji agreed. After getting his approval, Gong Yimo did not say anything else and continued to guard her little sprouts. At first glance, it was obvious that her potatoes were improved high-yield varieties. She originally only had 20 potatoes, but she used 15 of them. After they germinated, she cut them into about 100 pieces. According to the standard yield, each pit had 4 to 8 potatoes. Not counting the small potatoes, she had nearly 1,000 seeds. Just thinking about it made her excited. When the day came, it would be even more amazing. Some of Lu Ye's important officials came over. They wanted to see if the potatoes could really grow and grow. Secondly, they wanted to know if the yield was as high as Gong Yimo said. This was the most important thing. Gong Yimo was also very nervous. At this time, the cover had been lifted. People could only see the sprouts, but not the fruits. Even Longqing Wuji was puzzled. Could it be that the sprouts were food? Gong Yimo smiled and said mysteriously, "The fruits are underground." This sentence surprised everyone. Gong Yimo was already rubbing her hands and preparing to pull out the sprouts. She did not know how much she would produce. Because she was nervous, she did not even peek. Could it be that there was not even one? At this moment, she felt like she was gambling. This was the first time she was working so hard. Please don't embarrass me. With this thought, Gong Yimo reached out and pulled out a sprout. It was quite heavy. She pulled them out all at once. At this moment, she was so happy that she almost cried. There were actually 8 of them. Not counting the small ones, this sapling actually grew 8 fruits. Everyone gathered around to take a look, but Dragon City Limitless was the most shocked. He was very clear about how many seeds Gong Yimo had in her possession. In just 3 short months, she was able to obtain so many fruits. His eyes swept across the field. There were more than 100 seedlings. If each of them had such a high yield, it meant that she had used the dozen or so seeds in her hand to obtain nearly 1,000 fruits in 3 months. This could no longer be described as high yield. It was simply heaven-defying. Many of the ministers were shocked, but the most shocked were the farmers. When they saw this result, they suddenly knelt down. This lowly one doesn't need the reward. Can the king bestow a few of these divine items to this lowly one? I can't thank you enough. They were the ones who knew their value the most. Once they obtained this fruit, it meant that they would no longer have to endure the cold and hunger of winter after a year. Dragon City Limitless finally recovered from his shock. He looked at Gong Yimo and waved his hand to allow it. His original intention was to bestow these to the commoners, so that they would no longer have to suffer from hunger. 1,000 seeds was not a lot, but it wasn't a little either. But if all of them were to germinate, that would be a few thousand seeds. Then they would grow. It was now the end of April, the best time to plant. In a few months, how much would they be able to produce? If they properly maintained it, next year, their Lu Yi would no longer have to endure the cold and hunger of winter. Just as everyone was celebrating, Gong Yimo lowered her head and plucked out the seeds one by one. Almost every one of them was a high yield. This was partly because of her catalysis, but it also had a lot to do with the variety of the seeds. This thing could withstand the cold and could be stored for a long time. In a few years, no one in Lu Yi would starve to death in winter. And no one in the border city would come out of their closed-door cultivation because of hunger. This was the reason why she came to Lu Yi, and it was also what she wanted to do the most. Dragon City Limitless could no longer use words to describe his feelings. The entire tent was filled with people, and there were sounds of joy everywhere. But he only wanted to stay by Gong Yimo's side, and pick up the fruits from the ground with her. Gong Yimo was very happy in her heart. But her joy was quickly overshadowed by the cheers of the crowd. And after that joy, she felt even more tired. During this period of time, she did not sleep well. Every day, she was thinking about this place. Now, she only wanted to finish this and go to sleep. Everything could wait until she woke up. Are you not happy? Looking at her calm appearance, Dragon City Limitless asked in a low voice amidst the noise. Gong Yimo turned her head and smiled back, happy. But I'm a little tired. Her voice was tinged with a trace of naivety and sleepiness. Dragon City Limitless also saw the bruises under her eyes. His heart ached and he hurriedly pulled her back. How could he forget how nervous Gong Yimo was these few days? Really? He was too careless. Go and rest. I'll be here. But Gong Yimo was still not at ease. These were all her hard work for the past few months. Seeing that she was not obedient, Dragon City Limitless pulled her up. She did not rest well, and she got up too quickly. She felt dizzy and directly fell down. But Dragon City Limitless held her in his arms. Everyone listened to my orders. His voice suppressed all the joyful voices in the tent. Everyone go out and surround this place. Without my orders, no one is allowed to enter. Everyone hurriedly obeyed. That's right. These were all gold on the ground. They could not step on them and they retreated with smiles. When they looked at Gong Yimo again, their eyes were filled with warmth, as if they were looking at their own daughter. Seeing that everyone had left, Gong Yimo still wanted to keep the seeds on the ground before leaving. But Dragon City Limitless held her up by the waist. What are you doing? She was shocked. I still have things to do. But Dragon City Limitless was very domineering. It's the same tomorrow. You have to go to sleep now. No, I can't sleep until I'm done. Put me down quickly. But Dragon City Limitless was born with godly strength. If she did not use her internal energy to push him away, how could she be his opponent? Unable to persuade Dragon City Limitless, Gong Yimo said sullenly, "All right. I don't want to do it anymore. Put me down, I'll walk by myself." There were so many people outside. How could she be carried like this? Although she was very sleepy and tired, it was comfortable to be carried like this. Thinking of this, she let out a small yawn. But Dragon City Limitless did not let go, anyway, so many people saw it. What's the problem? Our Lu Yi does not have as many rules as your Dai Yu state. His voice came through drowsily. When it landed in Gong Yimo's ears, it was as if it was ringing in the sky. She was already sound asleep. Dragon City Limitless' heart softened and he could not help but slow down. Chapter 352. Because it was in Lu Yi, and she had offended someone, so during this period of time, when she was not around, Si Kong and his men were guarding there. But she was worried that someone was plotting something, and Si Kong and his men would be at a disadvantage. Anyway, she was very nervous. So she could only guard there herself. And now, the result was finally out. Her heart also lightened, and she no longer felt uneasy. She actually fell asleep in Long Qingguoji's arms just a few steps away. He was tall, and in contrast, Gong Yimo was very small. She was nestled in his thick fur coat, like a little kitten. Long Qingguoji did not know how to describe his feelings. The only feeling he had was that he hoped that the road back to his residence. The longer the better. As the king of Lu Yi, Long Qingguoji rarely felt conflicted about anything. His character had decided that he would do what he thought, but this time, he was a little lost. Before meeting Gong Yimo, he had never thought that any girl would be so special. She had strength and decisiveness that did not lose to a man, and wisdom and talent that did not lose to a man. When she was aggressive, it made people love and hate her. When she was focused, it made people respect and admire her. When she was mischievous, it made people love and pity her, but he already had a fiancée. So he did not say anything. Perhaps this feeling would disappear in the future. As long as she left Lu Yi, it would disappear. The next day, when Gong Yimo woke up, the first thing she did was to go to her vegetable field to get 2 potatoes. She had not tried the taste yet, and did not know if it was good or not. Seeing that Gong Yimo wanted to use it to cook, Long Qingguoji did not want to. Long Qingguoji refused in his heart. 2 potatoes. After it sprouted, it would become the mother seed. How many fruits would it bear? But if Gong Yimo wanted to eat, he would definitely agree. He wanted to try the taste, and see if it was as good as Gong Yimo said it was. She always had seasonings in her space, so in a short while, she made a plate of fried potato strips. That smell, just by smelling it, was fragrant. After making a few more dishes, the two sat on the steps of the palace to drink. It was already evening, snow was falling, and everything was silent. Long Qingguoji was conquered by this taste, but when he looked at her face, he actually forgot to taste this rare delicacy and stared at her in a daze. Gong Yimo, why are you doing this? He asked the question that had been bothering him for a long time. Why did you bring such a magical thing to Lu Yi instead of contributing it to Dai Yu State? Snow fell on Gong Yimo's body. At this moment, she squinted her eyes like a lazy cat, with a trace of carelessness. Because Lu Yi is very poor. She said it as if it was a matter of fact, which almost angered Long Qingguoji to death. But he had to admit that what she said was the truth. Lu Yi was very poor, and Lu Ye's people did not like to be restrained. They could ride horses to war, but it would be difficult for them to do business in the fields. However, he should not have said it out loud. Longqing Wuji said arrogantly. That's because my people don't like those twists and turns, and they don't care about doing business. Gong Yimo smiled. That's because Lu Ye's people are mostly uneducated. When she said that, Longqing Wuji almost lost his face. Studying in Lu Yi was a very luxurious thing. When the children grew up, they would not be herding sheep or feeding horses. Why would they study? Moreover, Lu Yi was a nomadic people. They would not stay in a fixed place, so how could they study? Just like him, he only studied the Eagle language and Lu Ye's history. Gong Yimo continued. They don't study because they are poor. People are constantly running around to feed their animals and their families. Who would have the time to care about whether their children study or not? Moreover, from your point of view, Lu Yi lacks everything. They don't have any fruits, vegetables, or staple food. They don't even have salt. Therefore, you all think that in such a bad situation, poverty is inevitable. Many people feel at ease being poor. Gong Yimo. Longqing Wuji gritted his teeth. Don't think that I don't dare to hit you. He was Lu Ye's people. They were the most ambitious and the bravest people. They were the children of the eagle. Why did Gong Yimo say that they were a bunch of mediocre people who took things for granted? Isn't that the case? She glanced at him and asked. Longqing Wuji could not refute that. He thought about it and finally said angrily, but Lu Yi has no food, no salt, and it's a fact that the environment is bad. That's why Lu Yi has it harder than the people of Daiyu State. It's because you have everything. Gong Yimo pinched the wine bottle between her fingers and narrowed her eyes. But have you thought about what Daiyu State doesn't have? What do you have? Longqing Wuji was stunned. You have vast land. You have horses, sheep, and cows. Your fur can be seen everywhere. However, a complete fur can be sold for a good price in Daiyu State. Your agate and jade are not worth much, but these can be sold for a sky-high price in Daiyu State. Her voice was faint, but it seemed to be bewitching. It made King Lu Ye's eyes shine brighter and brighter. The ancients were limited by their horizons. They could not see the heights that Gong Yimo could see. Longqing Wuji was already very smart. From Gong Yimo's actions, he could infer many things. He wanted to open up a horse trade route with Yuheng. However, he only wanted to be able to buy food during the winter. He could not see anything else. It was as if he never knew that opening up the road further would bring about so many benefits. He had underestimated the benefits that trade could bring. I gave this to Lu Yi to plant because it is suitable for farming here. Moreover, it can solve one of Lu Ye's biggest problems. In a situation where you do not lack food, the people in the border towns will not harass other countries and will not rob them. She said it openly, but it made Longqing Wuji blush for no reason. Moreover, you can spread this food. This process of spreading is the process of trade. It is also a form of training. Moreover, once they start farming, Lu Ye's people will start to have a sense of land. They will not wander around like before. They will cherish their own country more and will not peep at other countries' lands. Only when the people settle down, will Lu Yi have the opportunity to become emperor, so I hope that you can farm well in the future. On the basis of being self-sufficient, you can develop and become stronger. Her voice was cold and clear. Every word was said casually. However, in Longqing Wuji's ears, it was as if she was being guided by the gods. Longqing Wuji felt as if someone had woken him up. His head hurt. Then it became very clear, Lu Yi could not become emperor. Other than being poor, the nomadic people did not have a sense of land. They were small in number and the tribes were like loose sand. They came and went like the wind. It was not easy to manage them, not to mention centralizing power. But he never thought that Gong Yimo's action, which seemed to be solving the food problem of the people, was actually solving the problem of the country's foundation. Once the people settled down and started farming, they would not be tribes anymore. They would be towns. This town would not be like now. Although it was called a town, it was actually a market for the people to exchange goods. It would be like the forcibly built Huaqing. It would be a place where the people lived. Once the people settled down, there would be a city, a county, and finally a country. Not to mention, Gong Yimo had also drawn out a trade route that spanned across the 3 countries. This was to let Lu Yi settle down first. Then, on the basis of stability, she would establish a road of development. So that the people of Lu Yi could change their way of life and live like the people of Daiyu State, she must be a guide sent by the Eagle God. She must be. Chapter 353. Longqing Wuji did not know how to thank Gong Yimo. No matter how he thought about it, he felt that he could not repay her. So, he simply stood up and cupped his fists towards Gong Yimo. What are you doing? Gong Yimo's tone was still light and slightly surprised, but she accepted Lu Ye's salute. After the salute, Longqing Wuji was still a little confused and did not know what to say. Solving the winter food shortage, making Lu Yi the emperor, and then strengthening Lu Yi. These were his life's goals, and now he had a chance to achieve all of them. All of these were thanks to her, but he did not know how to repay her. What should I do? He frowned. I never take things for free. Gong Yimo smiled. Don't worry, I have conditions. But I only provided an opportunity. Whether you can grasp it or not is still up to you. Just like how there are many crops that are suitable for Lu Yi to grow, it's just that the yield is lower. When the people of Lu Yi settle down in the future, they will naturally find them. But this process is very long. It's not something that can be solved by me. Longqing Wuji shook his head seriously. It's you who gave them a chance to settle down. Gong Yimo covered her mouth and laughed. I have my own selfish motives too. Longqing Wuji could not tell at all what selfish motives she had in this matter. Gong Yimo smiled like a little fox. Other than what we agreed on, I can make a request. Once trade is established, the people of Daiyu State will be able to spend very little money to buy suitable fur, and the borders will no longer be guarded against people who want to take advantage of them. Her laughter made Longqing Wuji flustered. He wished he could give an order to not let anyone disturb the borders of other countries. In the end, Gong Yimo's expression turned serious. Looking at him, he spoke slowly and forcefully, one word at a time. You have to believe that it's not necessarily a good thing for one country to be the strongest. It's not necessarily a bad thing for you if others are doing well. If you care too much about gains and losses, you'll only lose more. A win-win situation is the best outcome. Her words seemed very simple, but they were also very profound. It was like a complicated secret text, one word after another entering his soul, leaving a deep imprint. He never knew that there would be a woman with such a broad mind and vision. Just as she said, if she cared about gains and losses, she could vent her anger on Lu Yi for what Wuyo and Ting Shui had done to her and refuse to help. It was precisely because she didn't look at the problem within herself, but at the whole world that she selflessly helped Lu Yi solve his problem. Such magnanimity was deeply impressive. Gong Yimo looked at his rare dazed look and smiled gently. Do you remember that you still owe me a favor? Say it. As long as I, Lu Yi, can do it, I'll do it. He said these words resolutely and decisively. Gong Yimo thought for a moment, then looked at the sky and sighed softly. If it's possible, I want you to set an iron law when you become an emperor in the future. The word emperor made Longqing Wuji's heart skip a beat. In the past, he felt that it was unattainable, but now it seemed that it was just a so-so. Say it. His voice was so dry and hoarse. Gong Yimo pursed her lips and smiled. Her eyes were clear and bright, as if they could contain all things. Unless there's an enemy, there won't be any war within 100 years. She blinked and looked at Longqing Wuji. After the country is established, are you willing to set this iron law? Her voice was very soft, but each and every word was as heavy as 1,000 pounds. Longqing Wuji couldn't help but look at her deeply, as if he wanted to look into the depths of her soul. She seemed to understand Lu Ye's nature better than he did, and also understood people's hearts better. The oath of the founding of the country was an iron law that must be obeyed, unless you don't establish the country. Many countries declared themselves emperors or emperors when they ascended the throne would leave behind a promise to lead their people to prosperity. Gong Emo, on the other hand, had asked him to establish such an iron law. It wasn't even because of fear. It was because she had a weapon that everyone yearned for, so she wasn't afraid of Lu Ye's army. But she wanted Lu Ye to make this oath because she wanted peace in the world, at least for 100 years. As if she was afraid that he wouldn't agree, Gong Yimo continued. After Dai Yu State's crown prince inherits the throne, I will also ask him to make 100 years agreement. When brother Kim Yoon inherits the throne, I will also ask him to make 100 years agreement in exchange for the rights and interests of Golden Jade Bank. As for Yu Qi, I will also ask them to agree to this request. This is an agreement between the 4 countries, and it's a flourishing agreement. Do you agree? What a good agreement between the 4 countries, what a flourishing agreement. Longqing Wuji suddenly smiled. His teeth were very white, and when he smiled, his beautiful blue eyes narrowed. It was especially dazzling, like the sun. I agree. Gong Yimo's eyes lit up when she heard this. She reached out her small hand and clapped it to make an oath. Longqing Wuji understood immediately. He reached out his large hand and clapped it lightly with her small hand. This evening, this simple, yet new history was established. It was also the most dazzling stroke in the history of Lu Ye's country. Time passed quickly. Lu Ye's summer seemed to come especially late. When the first batch of people cheered for their harvest, Gong Yimo was also about to leave Lu Yi. She felt that this trip was quite successful. At least after that time, Longqing Tingshui didn't appear again. This made her very satisfied. And as the farming exchange deepened, the people of Lu Yi liked Gong Yimo more and more. They felt that she was beautiful and didn't put on airs. She answered all questions and had a good temper. So when they knew that she was leaving, the joy of the harvest was reduced by a lot. Gong Yimo didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That's the basic method. You can develop the rest yourselves. Gong Yimo smiled and told him some potato methods she knew. She didn't forget to remind him, now that the 3 countries have begun to trade, you can also go to other countries to take a look. There are more species suitable for Lu Yi. The burly man dressed like a farmer nodded repeatedly, indicating that he remembered. Thinking of something, Gong Yimo said again, choose a dry place to preserve the fruit. Don't eat it if it sprouts. It's poisonous. Yes, yes. He smiled and nodded repeatedly. Gong Yimo then turned to leave. The weather was a little hot, but it wouldn't be long before she returned to the country. When that time came, she could go to the mountain resort. Soon, the farewell banquet arrived as scheduled. The entire palace was very lively. Gong Yimo was forced to drink cup after cup of wine. She thought that she might have to sleep in the carriage the next day. Longqing Wuji was a little melancholy. At this moment, many women in white suddenly ran in. Each of them had a murderous look. They looked at Gong Yimo as if they were looking at an enemy. Longqing Wuji put down his cup heavily. What's the matter? At this moment, the leading woman walked out quickly. It was Flower Boat Wuyo. She looked anxious. Cousin. Quickly take this woman down. She's here to harm us. She's Lu Ye's enemy. Chapter 354. Preposterous. Dragonching Wuji said, Wuyo, put down your weapon. In Lu Yi, there was a power that did not belong to the emperor. That was the sacred lake. As a goddess, Hua Zhou Wuyo had many followers of the sacred lake. These people were not restricted by Dragonching Wuji. Hence, when Dragonching Wuji gave the order, the women did not move. Instead, they looked at Hua Zhou Wuyo. At this moment, Hua Zhou Wuyo was dressed in a white robe. She looked coldly at Gong Yimo. King, the Cha heir family has been exterminated. What? Dragonching Wuji was stunned. Then, he rushed down from the golden stage. He grabbed Hua Zhou Wuyo's shoulders and asked again in disbelief. What did you say? Old Cha heir, he's dead. Hua Zhou Wuyo said coldly. How? That's impossible. Half a month ago, old Cha heir came to thank him. He said that his people would not have to worry about winter. It was all thanks to him and Daiyu State's princess. Why would Hua Zhou Wuyo suddenly say something like that? It's all because of her. Hua Zhou Wuyo pointed at Gong Yimo. The things she taught us to plant are poisonous. That's why the Cha heir family was exterminated. Not only that, the other tribes are also showing signs of being poisoned. King. She's here to harm us. Dragonching Wuji was confused by old Cha heir's death. However, he still shook his head. That's impossible. There's no poison. I've tried it myself. King, why don't you come with me to take a look? Hua Zhou Wuyo saw that Dragonching Wuji trusted Gong Yimo. She couldn't help but mock him. Gong Yimo, who had just watched a good show, slowly walked down the stage. The other party had come prepared. She had no choice but to take the bait. Dragonching Wuji, let's go take a look. She sighed. She didn't understand why these people kept making things difficult for her. Dragonching Wuji was stunned. Old Cha heir had helped him a lot. How he wished that this was fake news, so after hearing Gong Yimo's words, he hurriedly led everyone at the banquet out of the city. However, reality slapped him hard in the face. Dead. Really? All dead. Dragon City Limitless walked in. The once bustling tribe was now dead silent. The ground was littered with corpses, all of them had died horribly. He hurriedly rushed into the main tent and saw old Cha heir lying on the ground. The entire tent was in a mess. There was a large silver pot on the ground and broken tea bowls all over the floor. From this, one could see how much he had struggled before he died and how much pain he had suffered. Longqing Wuji's eyes were bloodshot, the veins on his forehead popping out. He clenched his fists so hard that his knuckles cracked. Who was it? Who did all of this? He wanted to help Cha heir up, but it was useless. The Cha heir who had told him stories about eagles and encouraged him to grow up was already dead. What he did not tell Gong Yimo was that Cha heir's youngest son had died because Cha heir had given him all the food that was meant for his youngest son when there was a food shortage. When he asked Cha heir why he did that, he said that rather than both of them starving to death, it was better to save one. Wuji. You are the hope of the entire Lu Yi. He still remembered how sincere Cha heir was when he said that, and how decisively he had given up on his son. However, he was already dead. At this moment, a child's cry woke him up. No one dared to speak as they watched him rush into the neighboring tent like a madman. Then he carried out a child. This child was sleeping just now and had just woken up. After crying twice, Longqing Wuji held him in his arms and he stopped crying. He looked at Longqing Wuji with a pair of watery eyes and a finger in his mouth. He was cute and didn't know anything about the world. He didn't know that his people were all dead. What happened? His voice was very soft, as if he was afraid of scaring the child in his arms. However, the anger in his voice was tangible. As if it could burn everything. It was like a mountain, pressing down on everyone in front of him. Hua Zhou Wuyo suddenly laughed coldly. It's all because of her. She pointed at Gong Yimo, who was also shocked by Cha Er's death, and said loudly. The thing she brought is poisonous. They all died because they ate the poisonous fruit. Nonsense. Some of the officials who came along said. They had all eaten the potatoes and none of them had died from the poison. Where's the evidence? Longqing Wuji looked at Hua Zhou Wuyo. He only wanted evidence. At this moment, Flower Boat Wuyo clapped her hands and two people walked out from behind her. They were carrying baskets of potatoes, which were obviously stored in the Cha-Er tribe. However, most of them had spoiled, and some had sprouted and could no longer be eaten. This is only a part of it. Hua Zhou Wuyo scoffed. Bring him up. Once she finished speaking, someone dragged a burly man who was dressed like a farmer. When he saw so many important people present, he quickly lowered his head. Hua Zhou Wuyo asked, Tell me, did Gong Yimo say that these fruits are poisonous? That person looked at Hua Zhou Wuyo in surprise but was quickly frightened by her gaze. He trembled and said, Yes, the princess of Daiyu State said it herself that the sprouted potatoes can't be eaten because they're poisonous. Gong Yimo had told many people about this before. It was common knowledge. Hua Zhou Wuyo laughed coldly. But she didn't tell you how poisonous they are, right? The burly man didn't dare to speak. He looked at the corpses on the ground and was shocked. Could it be that these people had all died from eating the sprouted fruits? That was too scary. Seeing that Longqing Wuji still didn't believe her, Hua Zhou Wuyo ordered someone to bring a sheep over and forced it to eat the spoiled potatoes in the basket. The sheep was unwilling and in the end, it only ate a few mouthfuls before it foamed at the mouth and died. It scared everyone present. They wouldn't eat the sprouted potatoes. After all, they could be used to make seeds. This was because they were now using all kinds of things to make greenhouses. They weren't limited to planting 2 seasons a year. Therefore, they didn't know that sprouted potatoes could poison people to death. That was too scary. Fortunately, they found out about it now. Otherwise, when it was popularized throughout the country and they had no food to eat, they would definitely eat it regardless of whether it was spoiled or sprouted. When that time came, wouldn't the country be destroyed? At this moment, the way they looked at Gong Yimo was very scary. She had only casually said that there was poison, but she didn't say how strong the poison was. Wasn't she deliberately harming people? From this, one could see how ambitious he was. With this thought, many people stood further away from Gong Yimo. This woman had a vicious heart. They didn't expect her to do such a thing. To think that they were so grateful to her. She killed people without shedding a drop of blood. Didn't they see that she had wiped out an entire tribe in an instant? Chapter 355. Gong Yimo found it hilarious. When potatoes rotted or sprouted, they would produce poison, but the poison was not strong at all. Besides, it wasn't a disaster year. Gong Yimo couldn't think of any reason for the entire tribe to eat sprouted fruits. However, Cha Er's family had already died out. No one had told her the reason. You're going to convict me just like that? Gong Yimo's light tone was very hateful at this moment. However, she didn't care. She had to vent her anger. I said this thing is poisonous. It is poisonous, but the toxicity is very small. It won't kill anyone. She pointed at Chaire's corpse in the main tent. They were clearly poisoned by something else. It has nothing to do with potatoes. How do you prove it? Hua Zhou Wuyou smiled and lightly kicked the dead sheep beside his feet as he said in a deep voice. Right now, this poisonous plant is only grown in Huaqing. It hasn't been popularized yet. Look, not far from here is the Chair tribe's new plantation. If you think that the seeds in this basket are poisoned, you can also pick up a germinated seed and eat it. As long as you eat it, I will believe that you are innocent. Many people felt that it made sense. The main reason was that Lu Yi was very weak in medicine. When they fell sick, most of them had to endure through it. They didn't have much medicine to eat, not to mention poison and detoxification. Moreover, Lu Yi was a simple person. Food was so precious. It was impossible that someone would poison something just to harm others. Therefore, they felt that if Gong Yimo said that she was innocent, then eating a sprouted fruit would prove that it was normal. However, they didn't think that someone would be so ruthless. They were afraid that there wasn't a single fruit in the entire Chair tribe that wasn't poisonous. At this moment, another group of people came. From afar, they could hear the sound of someone crying. The curtain of the main tent was pulled open. It was a group of familiar people. Longqing Ting Shui glared at Gong Yimo, then angrily walked in front of Longqing Wuji. Brother! Many of our people are sick. Come and take a look. Longqing Wuji was shocked. He quickly walked out of the main tent. Everyone followed him out. However, they all subconsciously kept a distance from Gong Yimo. It was as if she was some kind of plague. Sure enough, a lot of people were sick. Longqing Wuji looked around and saw that there were over 1,000 people who were sick. Everyone's face was pale and looked very scary. They looked at Gong Yimo with complicated expressions. Some of them even had resentment. What's going on? With so many Lu Ye's people in trouble, Longqing Wuji's pain could be imagined. He could only feel his entire heart trembling. He could not believe that all of this was real. Longcheng's Ting Shui smiled proudly and pulled a random person forward. You say it. Why are you in pain? The woman looked at Longqing Wuji timidly. She had no choice, his face was so dark that it was scary. The baby had already been handed over to someone else, so he did not suppress his anger at all and let it all out. I don't know. She said weakly. I didn't eat much. I just ate the fruit of the earth every day. Many Lu Yi people called potatoes the fruit of the earth. Longqing Wuji did not believe her and quickly walked over to the others. These people were being supported by the guards, and their faces were all pale. Tell me. What's wrong with you? Longqing Wuji's hand grabbed a sick man's collar, his voice was suppressed, making the man's hair stand up. He said with a sobbing tone, I just ate a lot of the fruit of the earth. Today I suddenly had diarrhea. Longqing Wuji angrily let go of him and did not care that he fell to the ground and asked the others. But the answer he got was the same, that they did not eat anything, they only ate potatoes, and they ate a lot of them. After all, they still felt that it was fresh, but they did not expect that they would suddenly vomit, diarrhea, and stomach pain. Gong Yimo then knew that in order to frame her, the other party had spent a lot of money. At the same time, she felt sad. She wanted to do good, but these people, for their own selfish reasons, harmed her like this. At this moment, a woman suddenly ran out in pain. In the end, she fell to the ground, but the gaze she looked at Gong Yimo with was indescribable hatred. It's all because of you, you used the evil fruit to harm people. My husband is dead. You caused his death. Her voice seemed to have broken the vent, as many people started to curse at Gong Yimo. She was immediately isolated. In the huge open space of the tribe, no one stood by her side. As for Si Kong and the rest, because she was leaving tomorrow, they had already gone to prepare their luggage. At this moment, they probably did not know that Gong Yimo was being harmed, and the other party was so ruthless, it was very likely that Si Kong and the rest had also been harmed. In the midst of so many noisy voices, Long Qingguji had already given up. At this moment, he stood in the crowd, silently turned back to look at Gong Yimo, his eyes staring at her, as if he was possessed. At this moment, Hua Zhouwuo seemed to have suddenly realized something and said, "So the fruit itself is poisonous, it's just that before it rots, the toxicity is small, but once it germinates, the toxicity is very strong. I mean, how can there be such a perfect food in this world, resistant to dryness and cold, ripening quickly, and high yield, so it's actually poisonous?" Her words received everyone's silent approval. As she spoke, she smiled at Gong Yimo. "Everyone says that you're noble, but I didn't expect your heart to be rotten to the core. Ting Shua and I only offended you a little, and you want to take revenge on the entire Lu Yi? How scary! How can a woman like you deserve to be a princess?" Hua Zhouwuo's words represented faith, and when she said this, everyone felt that it was reasonable, and more than half of them actually believed her. No one thought that Gong Yimo would be the one to prove herself. She didn't even want to eat to prove her innocence, so they wouldn't defend her. Who asked her to be a citizen of the Daiyu state, and now she was plotting to harm the entire Lu Yi. This might be the Daiyu state's conspiracy. Many people thought with certainty. Long Qingguji also did not think that someone would be so ruthless as to poison the entire tribe's fruits in order to frame Gong Yimo. After all, the manpower needed to do this was extraordinary. He still underestimated women's hearts. So at this moment, he suddenly walked towards the plantation and picked up a sprouted fruit. He walked towards Gong Yimo step by step. At this moment, his eyes were red, and his veins were popping out. Obviously, he was agitated by the continuous deaths of his tribesmen, and he was extremely angry. He looked at Gong Yimo with a complicated expression. Old Cha Air's death made him unable to think, and he only wanted to prove it. He thought that as long as Gong Yimo ate it, he would believe her. Looking at his big hand reaching in front of her eyes, Gong Yimo's face was gloomy, and she did not say anything. This was Lu Yi, and her excuses were useless. She could only take out evidence, but the furious Lu Yi people would not give her a chance to prove herself. "Eat." His tone was stiff, and that one word made his throat tighten. He almost crushed the fruit in his hand. Chapter 356. Gong Emo looked down at his hand. At this time, his hand was still stained with dirt, and a small sprouted potato was in his hand. She sneered. Even if it wasn't poisoned, she wouldn't eat it. Seeing her smile, Long Chengwaji only felt pain in his heart. Cha Air's family was wiped out, and more than 1,000 people were sick. It probably accounted for half of the people who promoted the tribe. So many people had problems after eating it. Even if he did not believe that it was Gong Yimo's doing, other than that, what other explanation could there be? These were all people who gave up nomadism, gave up freedom, and submitted to Hua Qing, submitted to him. He really could not understand who would hate them so much. Their deaths and injuries were as painful as cutting off Long Chengwaji's flesh. If this was really done by Gong Yimo, then he who trusted Gong Yimo was the real sinner. So he must let Gong Yimo eat it, he must let her prove herself in front of everyone. "Eat it," he said again. Gong Yimo looked up at him. "I won't eat it, this thing is obviously poisoned." "Ah!" she snorted. It turned out that the angry Long Chengwaji pushed Gong Yimo. He was very strong, and Gong Yimo was not prepared. She was pushed to the ground by Long Chengwuji. His ears were filled with the sound of his clansmen cursing Gong Yimo, and there were also the sad and disappointed cries. Every sound was like a catalyst, provoking Long Chengwuji's nerves. Why was he disappointed? It was supposed to be a joyous harvest, and after this harvest, it would be promoted to the whole country. Lu Yi would not have to endure the cold winter and hunger anymore. But he did not expect that after spending half a year of manpower and resources, it was all a conspiracy in the end. It was all fake. Long Chengwuji was so angry that he could not think. He squatted down and lifted Gong Yimo's chin. His face was tense. In addition to the pressure in his tone, there was also a trace of grief and pleading. Eat it, and I will believe you. Gong Yimo slapped away the thing in his hand and looked at him stubbornly. I won't eat it, I'm not wrong. Give me a chance, I can prove myself. Sang. The treasured saber was suddenly unsheathed. In the next moment, the cold blade was pointed at the tip of Gong Yimo's nose. Layers of murderous intent. Gong Yimo could not help but raise her head. The moment she raised her head, she saw the coldness, pain, and murderous intent in his eyes. All of this is really because of you. His voice suddenly became very calm, but the things that were suppressed behind his back were too heavy, causing everyone around him to quiet down. However, their eyes, whether filled with hatred or grief, fell on Gong Yimo. At this moment, everyone was standing opposite of Gong Yimo. People from Lu Yi and people from Dai Yu State. Gong Yimo suppressed her anger and did not make a move. She hoped that Longqing Wuji could still retain a trace of rationality and not sentence her to death in his rage. Limitless Dragon City, please calm down. Could it be that you won't even give me a chance to prove myself? I have given you too many chances. He suddenly interrupted Gong Yimo's words with a sorrowful expression. If I had seen through you earlier, Chair family would not have been exterminated. This is all my fault. And now, I want to correct this mistake. As he spoke, his eyes widened and the saber in his hand actually chopped down towards Gong Yimo. At that moment, Gong Yimo's heart ached. He still did not believe her. At the same time, her eyes flashed with a trace of anger and she reached out her hand to counterattack. But at this moment of imminent peril, Longqing Wuji's broad blade was actually blocked by a narrow sword that was suffused with a bright light. Gong Yimo looked up in surprise. She did not expect it to be Gong Dai. She had never seen Gong Dai so angry before. His eyes seemed to contain the fire of hell. His gaze seemed to be able to burn anyone's soul. With a forceful flick, he pushed Longqing Wuji a few steps away. Royal sister. He pulled Gong Yimo up and hugged her tightly in his arms. God knows that when he arrived in Huaqing, he felt that something was wrong when he saw the chaos and quickly rushed over with the others. Just now, when he saw someone trying to stab Gong Yimo with a saber, his heart almost stopped. At that moment, heaven and earth were silent. He definitely could not bear the consequences of being stabbed by that saber. Gong Yimo was hugged tightly in Gong Dai's arms and was still in a daze. She knew that the matter of the Three Countries horse ranch had basically been settled and they were just waiting to sit down and discuss further. She thought that Dai Yu State would at most send a minister to discuss this matter. She was preparing to return to her country and did not expect Gong Dai to bring a team over. He had so many things to do in the country, how could he leave? Longqing Wuji was shocked as well. He did not expect that Dai Yu State would send Gong Dai over just to discuss the matter of the Three Countries horse ranch. But at this moment, seeing Gong Dai hugging Gong Yimo so tightly, he understood that they did not send Gong Dai over, but Gong Dai himself. Seeing the two of them hugging each other tightly, Longqing Wuji felt that his originally burning anger had been stoked even more. But soon, a series of orderly footsteps were heard. It turned out that Gong Dai's men had arrived. A total of 2,000 people were facing off against Liu Ye's men. Among them were many innocent citizens of Liu Yi who were panicking. Gong Dai. Don't forget. This is Liu Yi. Longqing Wuji was angry and shouted loudly. Gong Dai hugged Gong Yimo tightly with one hand and pointed his narrow sword at Longqing Wuji. His pair of cold eyes were filled with murderous intent. Although they were in another territory, his aura did not back down at all. Anyone who harms royal sister is my enemy. The two of them faced off. Many people were panicking, such as Hua Zhou Wuyo. She had been captured by Gong Dai once and knew how powerful Gong Dai was. If today's matter was exposed, then, she did not dare to imagine what would happen to her if she did not successfully kill Gong Yimo. So in order to break the stalemate, she waved her hand and ordered her men to move. Nearly 100 women in white charged towards the imperial guards brought by Gong Dai. Their swords were swinging without mercy. Her original intention was that if Gong Dai's men killed someone, she would take the opportunity to provoke a fight between the two sides. In the end, who would want to look into her problems when they were blinded by killing? At that time, it would not be a family fight, but a national fight. However, she had underestimated Gong Ju. Because Gong Ju didn't issue any orders, his men were able to effortlessly capture more than 100 women alive. The weapon in the woman's hand fell to the ground with clanking sounds. The martial arts of the two sides were clearly not on the same level, so the people of Dragon City Wuji didn't even have time to kill until their eyes turned red. They were intimidated by the other side's martial arts, and became serious and cautious. At this time, Longqing Wuji finally sobered up. He knew why Gong Dai was here. He could not help but think deeply. Even if the new species was a conspiracy, could it be that the horse ranch of the Three Kingdoms was also a conspiracy? But the benefits of this made him unable to think of any conspiracy. So after he calmed down, he suddenly thought, could it be that he had wronged Gong Yimo? But, how could that be? Chapter 357. In the stalemate, Gong Yimo glanced at Gong Dai, then harumphed coldly, "Can I defend myself now?" Her tone was light, but the anger in it was no less than Longqing Wuji's. If Gong Dai did not come, she would have held Longqing Wuji hostage and forcefully proved herself. But Gong Dai was here, which saved her a lot of effort. Gong Yimo's somewhat hoarse voice inexplicably made Longqing Wuji feel guilty. He was a little scared. If Gong Yimo really proved herself, then how was he going to face her? So he remained silent and did not speak. But his silence did not mean that the others were silent. Longqing Tingxua angrily said, "What else is there to say? We have evidence and witnesses. So what if you're from Dayu State? You've harmed so many of my people, Liu Yi, and you still want to escape unscathed?" Ha! Evidence and witnesses. Gong Yimo smiled and patted Gong Dai's hand comfortingly. Then she left Gong Dai's embrace and walked in front of the others. She coldly said to Longqing Wuji, "I'm going to prove myself now. Follow me." As she spoke, she walked towards the tent next to the main tent. Longqing Wuji hurriedly followed. Hua Zhou Wuyo and the others also followed because of their guilty conscience. At this moment, Gong Dai was outside. Sikong had already run in and knelt in front of him. "Your Highness, this subordinate is incompetent. I was entangled by someone just now. Your Highness, please punish me." Gong Dai really wanted to kill him, but he would be worried if the royal sister could not see him. So even if he was unwilling, he still coldly said, "Go and receive 50 strikes of the rod." Sikong was delighted, "Thank you, Your Highness." After he left, Gong Dai called Lo Qi and coldly ordered, "Seal off all directions. No one is allowed to leave." Yes. Lo Chi obeyed. He thought that touching the princess was the same as touching the prince's reverse scale. He even felt that if something really happened to Lu Yi, the Daiyu state would definitely go to war with Lu Yi. Gong Dai said a few more words and then walked into the tent. He wanted to protect the royal sister. These people couldn't tell right from wrong. They were too annoying. A large group of people surrounded the tent, but when Gong Dai came in, even though he came in alone, everyone unconsciously made way for him, allowing him to effortlessly walk to Gong Yimo's side. What do you want this prince to see? Longqing Wuji coldly asked. Just a moment ago, he had found the baby here. He wanted to see what Gong Yimo was going to do. Gong Yimo scanned the room and her eyes lit up when she saw something. She walked over and picked up a porcelain bowl. Sure enough, there was still a small bowl of something mushy inside, but she didn't know what it was. Take a look. What is this? Longqing Wuji looked and even dipped a little into his mouth to taste it. Although it was bland and tasteless, he quickly knew that it was the taste of potatoes. It was just that someone had made it into a mushy state. In other words, this baby was also feeding on this poisonous fruit. Gong Yimo promptly said, if it's as a certain someone said, potatoes are poisonous, then why isn't this child poisoned? Hua Zhou Wuyo's back was covered in cold sweat. Perhaps, it's because he didn't eat much, so the poison is shallow. Is that so? Gong Yimo looked at her and smiled meaningfully. If a baby can resist the poison, then it's really strange that an adult can't. Since that's the case, follow me. They entered the main tent again. In the main tent, old Chaire's corpse was still there. No one had touched it, and no one had cleaned up the broken pieces on the ground. Gong Yimo said, don't you find it strange? Why are there so many broken bowls on the ground? It's as if they all drank something together when they were alive. Also, old Chaire's tribe mostly used coarse sandstone bowls. I really want to know, where did this silver pot come from? As she spoke, she picked up an empty silver pot on the ground. This was something that Hua Zhou Wuyo had never expected. She was born in the wealthy Hua Zhou family and had lived a life of luxury since young. How could she know what ordinary people lived like? How could she know that the leader of a tribe was so poor that even a silver pot was so conspicuous? Moreover, she was very nervous at that time. She saw that everyone was dead and in a rush for time. She didn't even notice that there was something wrong with a silver pot on the ground. But now that it was picked up by someone, she realized how strange it was. Just as she was racking her brains to find an explanation for this silver pot, everyone suddenly exclaimed. It was Gong Yimo. She actually tore the small pot open with her bare hands. Then with her hands, she flipped the inside of the pot. The silver pot made a cracking sound. How much strength did she have? There was definitely nothing in the pot. But when she flipped it open, everyone saw a shocking scene. That was the inside of the silver pot was black. This kind of black made people think that it was a silver needle testing for poison. It was the same logic. Hua Zhou Wuyo's entire body was trembling slightly. Even if someone found this pot, they would only look to see if there was any liquid in the pot. Who would directly open the pot to look inside? This was simply too shocking. She had to think of a countermeasure. Longqing Wuji stared blankly at the silver pot. Finally, his gaze fell on Hua Zhou Wuyo's forced calm face. At this time, Gong Yimo faintly said. Let's make a hypothesis. Okay, there's a very sacred thing in this silver pot. Everyone wants it. No, everyone wants to drink it. That's why there are so many coarse tea bowls. Everyone is rewarded with a bowl, and everyone drinks it gratefully. And that baby fell asleep. The person who brought this thing here felt that a baby would not know anything. So he let him go. Hence, everyone who drank it died. But the baby who ate the mashed potatoes was fine. At this time, Gong Yimo suddenly looked at Hua Zhou Wuyo with lightning-like eyes. I wonder what kind of water is so sacred in Lu Yi. Obtaining it is a gift. Only sacred water. Seeing Hua Zhou Wuyo was so frightened that she did not know what to do, Longqing Ting Shui hurriedly sneered, "Stop quibbling. Don't tell me you still want to push the blame to Sister Wuyo. She is Lu Ye's goddess. She is Lu Ye's faith. You think you can defame her with just a few words? Even if you are right. Then what about those people outside? There are more than 1,000 people outside. Don't tell me they all drank the sacred water. Stop joking." Gong Yimo twirled a strand of her hair. "I don't need to know the process of them being poisoned, right?" She looked at Longqing Wuji and sneered, "I only need to prove that the mashed potatoes are not poisonous. But if my methods are too extreme, I hope that King Lu Yi will forgive me." Chapter 358. When she said this, many people in the crowd panicked. If she followed Longqing Ting Shui's words and proved that she had nothing to do with the poisoning of the 1,000 people, then they would still have a lot of loopholes to exploit. But if Gong Yimo directly proved that the potatoes were not poisonous, then the 1,000 people's illness would not be her responsibility, but Longqing Wuji's investigation. Then why did they go through so much trouble and scheme? For what? At this moment, Longqing Wuji's heart had already turned cold. He had a premonition that this matter might not be Gong Yimo's doing. But if it was not her doing, then it was Lu Ye's people who harmed themselves. This ending was even harder for him to accept. All right. His voice was heavy, as if from the moment Gong Dai appeared, he seemed to have been drained of all his energy, leaving only emptiness. He looked at Gong Yimo. "As long as you can prove that the fruits are not poisonous, then you are innocent." Gong Yimo smiled, "It's a promise. King, please send someone to the Chair tribe's cellar and bring some fruits over." Longqing Wuji nodded. Very quickly, someone brought over a basket of potatoes. These were mostly in good condition, obviously they had been carefully stored. Then Gong Yimo walked to the front of the bamboo basket and reached into it, then took out a sprouted potato. Everyone thought that she had taken it out from the basket, but in reality, she had taken it out from her space. But no one would know. Hua Zhou Wuyo was originally very nervous, but now seeing that Gong Yimo wanted to use this method to prove herself, she could not help but laugh. She had poisoned the entire Chair tribe's fruits. No matter if it was good, bad, or in the ground, there was not a single one that was not poisonous. The small bowl of muddy soup that the baby had eaten was already her miscalculation. She could guarantee that there would not be any problems with the rest. As long as Gong Yimo ate it, she would definitely die. Anyway, as long as Gong Yimo died, it did not matter whether she was innocent or not. But would Gong Yimo let her off so easily? She held the potato in her hand and walked in front of Hua Zhou Wuyo, asking her. "You're saying that all fruits are poisonous. It's just that the ones that haven't sprouted are less poisonous, while the ones that have sprouted are more poisonous, right?" At this moment, Flower Boat Worryless was in a difficult position. How could she say no? So she nodded. Gong Emo smiled. "Then, are you saying these words in your own name, or do you represent the position of the Hua Zhou family, or the position of the sacred lake?" On this point, Hua Zhou Wuyo did not dare to speak carelessly. However, if she did not say anything, it would make her seem guilty. She gritted her teeth and said, "As a goddess, I say this conclusion. This fruit is clearly poisonous." "Very good." Gong Yimo smiled with satisfaction. Does that mean that if I didn't die after eating it, it means that you're lying and someone is framing you? Hua Zhou was afraid that she would play tricks and hesitated. Gong Yimo continued, or you can eat it. I guarantee that you won't die. He would definitely die. Hua Zhou's face darkened. Yes, as long as you eat it and don't die, I'll take it that you're right. She did not believe that Gong Yimo was immune to poison. Gong Yimo smiled and crushed the potato in her hand. Then, she pinched the clean part in the middle and ate it. She really ate it. Longqing Wuji wanted to stop her, but he did not know what reason to use. He could only stare at her. At this moment, he was so afraid that something would happen to her. Hua Zhou saw her eat it with her own eyes. There was no mistake. However, eating a little was not enough for her. She continued to slowly eat the crushed part in the middle of the potato. Her every action seemed to tickle Hua Zhou's nerves. She really ate it, but nothing happened to her. How was that possible? Hua Zhou walked over to the basket of fruits in disbelief. Could it be that these did not belong to the Chair family? She reached out and picked one up, as if to check it out. At this moment, Gong Yimo appeared behind her like a ghost. Are you curious why I didn't die? She lowered her voice and said this behind Hua Zhou. Her voice was faint, as if it came from the abyss of hell. Hua Zhou was shocked and was about to speak. Gong Yimo suddenly grabbed her hand and stuffed the fruit in her hand into her mouth. This action frightened everyone. Many people stood up to question Gong Yimo. What are you doing? Gong Yimo fiercely restrained Hua Zhou, who was struggling with all her might. She did not move, but Gong Dai had already stood in front of Gong Yimo. At this moment, he swung his sword and smiled coldly. If royal sister can eat it, why can't she eat it? Everyone, if you take another step forward, this king will make his blood splatter on the spot. Gong Dai's voice was filled with pressure. It actually forced those who wanted to save Hua Zhou to retreat. Longqing Wuji did not move as he watched Hua Zhou cry for help with tears in her eyes. As for Gong Yimo, her eyes were lowered as she forcefully stuffed the fruit into Hua Zhou's mouth. She did not let up. Why won't you eat it? She saw her clench her teeth and could not help but find it funny. You won't eat it because it's poisonous. You know what kind of poison it is, right? Hua Zhou was being restrained by Gong Yimo from behind. Her mouth was being stuffed with Gong Yimo's other hand, so she could not speak. This poison was very strong. If she ate a little, she would die. She did not want to die. She was Lu Ye's future princess. So her tears kept falling. At this moment, she was scared to death. Her tears fell onto the back of Gong Yimo's hand, but Gong Yimo did not let up on forcing Hua Zhou to eat. Her eyes were filled with ruthlessness. She wanted nothing more than to poison Hua Zhou to death. Hearing her sobs, Hua Zhou's father, Hua Zhou, was very worried. But with Gong Dai around, he did not dare to go forward. At this moment, he really wished that his son was here. He would definitely save his sister. After playing enough, Gong Yimo finally let go. She let go and Hua Zhou fell to the ground. Then, she quickly removed the thing from her mouth and vomited non-stop. Actually, she did not eat it at all. But she was afraid. That was a poison that could kill once it came into contact with blood. At this moment, Gong Yimo was also a little tired. She sneered at Longqing Wuji and said, "All right, I'm not playing anymore. Let me tell you the truth." She pointed at Hua Zhou. She refused to eat it because she poisoned all the fruits in the Chair tribe. Otherwise, why would she be so shocked when I ate it? If I made her eat it again, it would be like asking for her life. Gong Yimo laughed mockingly, but, I know of a place that she must have forgotten to poison. When she said this, even Hua Zhouweo was stunned. At this moment, she could still argue that the Cha Air tribe's fruits were poisonous because of the soil. It had nothing to do with her. But if Gong Yimo found a non-poisonous fruit in the Cha Air tribe, then she was dead meat. No way, she had poisoned everything. Even the ones in the ground were not spared. Even Longqing Wuji did not believe it. If someone had really poisoned them, would they have let any fish escape the net? Gong Yimo laughed, revealing a mouthful of white teeth. She spoke in a low voice like a demon. I taught them to eat potatoes without the skin. This is the principle of making the best use of everything. I think, in the food trough of the Cha Air tribe's cattle and sheep, you will definitely find the skin of the uneaten fruit. When that time comes, you will realize that all the fruits in the tribe are poisonous, but the skin of the animals is not. That will be very interesting. Chapter 359. It was interesting, but some people's hearts turned to ashes because of Gong Yimo's words. Gong Yimo clapped her hands, I'm done with my work. As for the evidence and the 1,000 people outside, that's your problem, Lu Yi. When the time comes, I hope King Lu Yi will clear my name. Long Qingting Shui wanted to cause trouble after hearing this. How was the 1,000 people outside not Gong Yimo's responsibility? She had yet to prove that she had nothing to do with their illness. But before she could open her mouth, she was stunned by her brother's gaze. She had never seen Long Qingting Wuji so scary. He was even scarier than the last time she killed 1,000 people. So all her words were stuck in Long Qingting Wuji's throat. Gong Yimo saw this and sneered in her heart. It was time for them to settle their family matters. As an outsider, she shouldn't be a hindrance. Seeing Gong Yimo leave, Long Qingting Wuji also left with an ashen face. The results of the evidence were the same as what Gong Yimo had said. In the livestock's food trough, there was indeed fruit skin. The livestock were fine after eating it, so it wasn't poisonous. This was really a shameful farce. So when the large group of people walked back, most of them didn't look good. They were still chatting and laughing at the banquet in the afternoon, but now they were all feeling guilty. They walked towards the palace. Gong Yimo and Gong Dai were guests from Daiyu State, so they definitely had to stay in the palace. As for the ministers, none of them dared to leave. Didn't they see that the king's face was so gloomy? Hua Zhouweo walked at the back of the group with a pale face. Seeing the 1,000 people who were poisoned being brought to the palace, his heart thumped and he became even more afraid. At this moment, someone suddenly stretched out his hand to grab Gong Yimo. Before anyone could react, Gong Dai had already blocked the person with his sword. It was a short old man with white hair. He was very surprised to be blocked, but the moment he saw Gong Yimo, he was stunned. He was clearly stunned. He opened his mouth and unconsciously spat out 2 words. Although others didn't hear it, from the shape of his mouth, people could tell that it was Shuoyan. And Shuoyan, wasn't that the name of her cheap mother? Gong Yimo widened her eyes and stopped Gong Dai. At the same time, except for King Lu Yi, everyone present knelt down. Even King Lu Yi cupped his fists in greeting. Greetings to the holy ancestor. As soon as he said this, Gong Emo knew who this person was. He was the guardian of Lu Ye's people. But from his facial features, he didn't look like he was from Lu Yi. Moreover, he was from her clan, her chief, she was a clansman. Gong Yimo pondering, similarly, Gong Ju was also surprised. He naturally noticed that Gong Ju called out the name Shuel Yen. Isn't that his sister's mother? Similar. They were too similar. Shui Zhan couldn't describe his current feelings. He watched Shulian grow up and naturally knew what she looked like when she was 17 or 18 years old. But when he thought of her identity, Shuizhan was shocked. Don't panic. This matter needs to be discussed with the clansmen. Therefore, he looked away after looking at Gong Yimo for a while and said to Longqingwuji. The Holy Lake already knows about today's matter. As a goddess, Flowerboat Wuyo has done such a thing. This old man wants to bring her back to be punished. I hope that King Luyi can make things easy for us. Longqingwuji glanced at Hua Zhou Wuyo. Hua Zhou Wuyo was a member of the Holy Lake, and indeed, the Holy Lake had the right to punish him. However, his action of grabbing Gong Emo made Longqingwuji feel that Shuizhan was biased, so he sneered. Sure, but Flowerboat Wuyo has committed a heinous crime. She should be punished severely. I hope the Holy Lake will deal with her impartially. His words made Shuizhan's expression freeze for a moment. Flowerboat Wuyo was shocked. She didn't expect Longqingwuji to say something like this. If she was punished severely, wouldn't she lose the right to be a goddess? Without the halo of a goddess, she was just an ordinary fourth daughter of the Flowerboat family. How could she marry Longqingwuji? Shuizhan swallowed his anger and nodded. Then, he looked at Flowerboat Wuyo seriously and said, You will be punished severely. As he spoke, he left with Flowerboat Wuyo and the girls she brought. Gong Yimo looked at his back and pondered. She tolerated the sneak attack because there was something strange about it. She didn't meet anyone related to Shulian in her previous life. Why did she meet her in this life? In line with the principle of less trouble is better than more trouble, she didn't care. She also appeased Gong Ju, who was very angry with Shuizhan. Gong Yimo wasn't interested to know how Longqingwuji would deal with his sister. She drank in the afternoon and was tormented by all kinds of things. There was also the matter of Shuizhan. All she wanted now was to have a good sleep. However, there was someone who made it impossible for her to sleep. Gong Dai reached out to poke her hair and pinch her face. It was as if he was playing with an interesting toy. Gong Yimo closed her eyes and pretended to sleep. However, how could she fall asleep? She opened her eyes and stared at him. Gong Dai, you're tired from the journey. Don't you want to rest? His dark eyes lit up. Yes. As he spoke, he lay down beside her and stared at her. Damn. How could she fall asleep like this? Just as Gong Yimo wanted to chase him away, Gong Dai's eyes suddenly darkened. Royal sister, don't you miss me at all? We haven't seen each other for almost half a year. Why aren't you excited to see me? Gong Yimo was sad. She wasn't excited. However, she wouldn't tell Gong Ju how surprised she was when he suddenly appeared in front of her. She also wouldn't tell him that, when she was held tightly in Gong Ju's arms, she was also confused for a moment. She shouldn't have. She wrapped herself in the quilt with grief and indignation and began to reflect on herself. Royal sister. Gong Dai pried open Gong Yimo, who was curled up like an ostrich, and forced her to look into his eyes. For so many days and nights, he missed her so much. How could he allow her to ignore him? What's so interesting about sleeping? Look at me. In front of Gong Yimo, Gong Dai would always put on a cold and serious face and softly say embarrassing things. It was totally different from how he was in front of others. The weather seemed to be hot all of a sudden. Gong Dai's palms were separated by a thin layer of clothes and he could almost burn her skin. What's so nice about you? Being shaken by Gong Dai on the bed like a cat, Gong Yimo couldn't pretend to be an ostrich anymore and asked fiercely. She even opened her eyes wide to take a look. However, she really felt that Gong Dai was different. He was taller, slimmer, and his facial features were more defined. He looked exactly the same as the devilish him in her previous life. However, in this life, his temperament was like bamboo. Most of the time, he was cold and cheerless. He would only show some gentleness when he looked at her. Just a little bit of gentleness was enough to drown a person. "Do I look good?" he asked. Chapter 360. Seeing that Gong Yimo was in a daze, he couldn't help but smile. This smile was truly deadly. It was like ice and snow melting bit by bit under the warm sunlight, reflecting sparkling and translucent colors. This was the rhythm of completely overshadowing Jin Yun. Ah, it's not nice. She dishonestly turned her face and faced Gong Dai with her butt. Her hands unconsciously covered her face, and her heart started to beat faster. What was wrong with her? Why did she feel like she was acting weird when she saw him this time? Gong Dai pursed his lips and smiled. With her back facing him, Gong Yimo couldn't see the affection and slyness in his eyes. Those wicked hands were already on her waist, gently teasing her. "Ha ha ha ha. Gong Dai, you're dead meat." Gong Yimo's body instantly curled up like a shrimp, and she rolled around on the bed. Gong Dai's hands were empty, and he shamelessly tickled her, just like how she used to laze around in bed when they were young. Seeing that she was about to cry from laughing, Gong Dai reluctantly stopped. However, the moment he stopped, Gong Yimo pounced on him like a hungry tiger. Her eyes flashed fiercely, and she said fiercely, "You're dead meat, Gong Dai. I'm going to kill you. Are you afraid?" Just then, Gong Dai raised his hands high above his head. His cold voice sounded a little expectant. "Come on." It was like punching cotton. Gong Yimo angrily took out a nylon rope from her space and prepared to tie him up. Gong Dai suddenly said, "Royal sister, are you going to do those weird things to me?" He couldn't help but think of the half-burned candle and the leather whip, and he frowned slightly. He thought helplessly that if she really liked it, he would play along. How could Gong Yimo bear to touch him when he was so docile and obedient? She even had the feeling that if she took out her whip and told him to take off his shirt, he would obediently take off his pants as well. Therefore, she put the rope back and took out a lot of gadgets from her space. Gong Dai was a little nervous. Although he knew that the royal sister wouldn't do anything to him, seeing her sitting on him made him nervous for no reason. "Close your eyes," she said loftily like a queen. Gong Dai subconsciously closed his eyes. Then, he felt something cold on his eyes. What was the royal sister applying on his face? It smelled good. Gong Yimo snickered in his ears. This was the makeup she had brought from the other world. There wasn't much left. What she applied on Gong Dai's eyes was black eyeshadow. Originally, she thought that it would be ugly like a panda. However, for some reason, when she applied it on Gong Dai's face, looking at the black blur and slightly upward, it actually gave people a kind of enchanting and dark beauty. Seeing that he wanted to open his eyes, Gong Yimo hurriedly told him not to move. Only then did he behave and obediently let Gong Yimo do whatever she wanted. Gong Yimo took out the powder and lightly patted it on his overly white face. If it was a normal person, they would definitely think that it was feminine, right? However, Gong Dai's long eyelashes fluttered slightly, and it actually gave people a feeling of crystal fragility. What a strange sight. Gong Yimo took out her lipstick and lightly dipped it in her fingertips. Then, she applied it on his light-colored lips. Gong Dai's somewhat hurried breathing blew on her fingertips. Suddenly, she felt a kind of itch in her heart. It was as if someone had used a small brush to tease her heart, causing the rhythm of her breathing to be disrupted. She didn't notice this, but Gong Dai, who was lying under her, did. His hand unconsciously hugged Gong Yimo's waist. Both of them were enjoying this rare piece. The bright red color spread little by little on Gong Dai's lips. His lips were very soft. That thin warmth passed through her fingertips and into her heart, causing her heart to become chaotic. At this moment, both of them didn't speak. It was as if they spoke, something would be disturbed. Gong Dai quietly opened his eyes and looked at Gong Yimo's face, which was just inches away from him. Her breath gently blew on his chin, giving him a kind of tickling feeling. Her hair was hanging to one side, and her brows were slightly furrowed. She seemed to be doing something important. Her little mouth revealed a little bit of her pearly white teeth, and she was gently biting her lower lip. She looked really delicious. At this moment, Gong Yimo had also finished her painting. Gong Dai blinked. That black eyeshadow and red lips made him look extremely devilish and beautiful. If he were a woman, he would definitely be worthy of the title, the perfect young man with light and heavy makeup. Their gazes unconsciously collided and couldn't be separated anymore. Only then did Gong Yimo realize how intimate this distance was. She quickly wanted to retreat, but a pair of large hands had already locked onto her waist, making it impossible for her to escape. "Royal sister, what did you do to my face?" Gong Dai asked with a smile. Even if it was Gong Yimo's prank, he wasn't angry at all. Gong Yimo looked at his face and then realized what she had done in a moment of naughtiness. She smiled apologetically. "It's nothing. I just made you look a little better." "Royal sister, do you have a mirror in your hand?" Gong Dai sat up and half-hugged her. At this moment, the two of them were in a very intimate position. Gong Yimo was straddling him, while he sat up and hugged Gong Yimo's waist. No, Gong Yimo wanted to escape, but at this moment, she didn't know where to go. Her eyes looked left and right, but she didn't look at Gong Dai. However, her flushed face and bright eyes had already exposed her. Gong Dai pursed his seductive red lips and smiled. This smile was really beautiful and soul-stirring. "Royal sister, if you don't listen to me, I'll teach you a lesson." She didn't know why, but when he used such a frivolous tone to threaten her, Gong Yimo swallowed her saliva for no reason. After a desperate struggle in her heart, she finally swallowed her luck and handed over the makeup mirror from her space with trembling hands. Gong Dai carried her with one hand and used the other to look at the mirror. Gong Yimo was still foolishly smiling and saying, "It looks so good. The color of your lips is too light. It needs to be pressed with a red color like this." Gong Dai suddenly took the mirror away and looked at Gong Yimo with a slight smile. His expression was like that of a vampire in Gong Yimo's time and space, looking at her prey. "Royal sister, the color of your lips is also light." He retracted his hand and Gong Yimo's entire upper body leaned forward and bumped into his chest. Her eyes widened and her face was full of panic. "Let me give you some color." With that said, he gently pressed his lips against Gong Yimo's lips. This kiss was separated by half a year. At this moment, her entire body was trembling slightly, as if she was afraid of something, resisting and longing for something. Her widened eyes gradually lost their luster and then a watery light appeared. Her hands kept pressing on Gong Dai's chest. She thought to herself, "Just a moment, I'll definitely push him away." Chapter 361. The bright red lipstick carried a faint fragrance and a faint sweetness as it melted between their lips and teeth. The red color not only dyed Gong Yimo's lips, but it also followed her lips downwards, slowly dyeing her chin, neck, and collarbone red. After not seeing each other for half a year, Gong Dai's passion was enough to melt a person. At this moment, the sound of footsteps suddenly came, startling Gong Yimo. What was she doing? She came back to her senses and quickly pushed Gong Dai away. She felt that her current appearance must be very ambiguous. She used her sleeve to wipe it, but there were still faint red marks left on her body. Unsatisfied, Gong Dai wanted nothing more than to kill the person who came. What a good opportunity. This was the first time that royal sister did not push him away. Therefore, when the person came in, he felt that the temperature in the room was unusually low. He did not enter the inner room, but saw Gong Yimo in the outer room and greeted her respectfully. Princess Jean of Daiyu State. At this moment, Gong Yimo's heart was beating very fast. She tried her best to ask calmly, "What's the matter?" The person said a little embarrassedly, "I shouldn't have disturbed the princess's rest, but the ancestor suddenly came and wanted to see you." Gong Yimo was a little puzzled. How long had it been? He came to see her as soon as he returned. He must have brought someone to confirm her identity. Perhaps he was not sure that she was Shulian's daughter, so he brought someone to identify her. Gong Yimo quickly calmed down. Once there was a serious matter, she could put her personal feelings aside. At this moment, she considered that her clothes were untidy, so she said to the person who came, "You go first. This princess will come after changing." "Yes." The person bowed his head and retreated. He was still thinking that the princess of Daiyu State was really beautiful. She was beautiful enough in the past, but now that he saw her, she was like a delicate flower blooming. Unfortunately, he did not dare to look any longer. Gong Yimo was thinking about something. When she returned to the inner room, she was stopped by Gong Dai before she could react. When she saw him, the fiery feeling made Gong Yimo's entire body turn red, revealing a faint pink. It was really the skin that one could not bear to part with. "Royal sister, even now, are you still trying to escape?" He gently lifted Gong Yimo's chin with his finger, forcing her to look at him. Gong Yimo's eyes were still wet, and her gaze was slightly averted. Her rationality told her that this man had killed her in her previous life. Who knew if she would suffer the same fate as Gong Che in this life if she liked him? However, her intuition told her that a person's mind was closely related to the environment they grew up in. She watched Gong Ju grow up, so how could she doubt his feelings? Then, she remembered the vow she made in front of the Bodhisattva in the ruined temple: she would never love anyone again. But more than that, she thought about the little things that Gong Dai had done for her. He was willing to cut his flesh and bleed for her, and he was even willing to die for her. These scenes, alternating and changing, made her head hurt. What did she want? Did she really want to do this? Seeing Gong Yimo frown and reveal a pained expression, Gong Dai's heart softened again. He was only agitated by Gong Che. He was afraid that Gong Yimo would fall in love with another man without him knowing. So, for the past 6 months, he could not wait to come here once he finished his work. If someone caught Royal Sister's eye while he was not around, even if that person was hated by Royal Sister, he wanted to kill that person. It was this uneasiness that made him want Gong Yimo to give him a reassuring answer. It was too painful to worry about personal gains and losses. But, how could all of this be compared to her frown? He reached out and touched Gong Yimo's forehead. She looked up at him. Gong Dai smiled gently and sighed silently. "Forget it, it's my fault. I shouldn't have forced you." He took a deep breath. "I just want to tell you that I have made some achievements in the past 6 months. The Long family has fallen, and our shop has moved to Yuhing. The cooperation with Yu Qi is also settled. They need my support in exchange. So, my influence has infiltrated 3 countries, and it will be more powerful in the future. So, are you happy?" Gong Yimo did not expect Gong Dai to do so many things in just 6 months. He was only 17 years old now. He was already much stronger than her. But, he was pushing himself too hard. "Are you happy?" Gong Dai asked again. Just like when they were young, he was looking forward to Gong Yimo's affirmation. Gong Yimo suddenly frowned and asked, "Are you happy?" In his previous life, Gong Ju loved power because he was surrounded by enemies. Only by firmly grasping power in the palm of his hand could he survive. In this life, she grew up with Gong Dai. Gong Dai did not have a strong desire for anything since he was young. Sometimes, he would even feel disgusted by some schemes. Then, was he happy that he had reached this step? Gong Ju's heart warmed when he heard her words of concern, and he raised his eyebrows slightly. His dark eyeliner should have been threatening, but he was so gentle in front of her. His smile was as clean as ice and snow. "I'm happy." He touched Gong Yimo's face and looked deeply at the fair skin between his fingers. "Royal sister and I. There is a natural distance between us. You and I are related by blood, even if I don't care. So, in order to get you, I must first gain the ability to compete with the world. So, every step forward makes me happy, because I'm one step closer to you." He lowered his eyes and said slowly in a low voice, "You don't have to do anything. You don't have to say anything. You just have to stand where I can see you. I will do my best to walk towards you, no matter what obstacles there are." He smiled as he said, "Even you can't stop me." At that moment, Gong Yimo really had the urge to tell him the truth. Gong Ju had been enduring because she said that she didn't accept blood relatives. She was afraid that the world would hate her. However, all of this didn't exist. They weren't blood relatives at all. Even if they had children, it wouldn't matter. So, he did not have to work so hard to get her, but she could not say this sentence out loud. She had to think about it, and think about it. But her hand still grabbed Gong Dai's hand that was on her face. Her palm was wet and she was obviously nervous. Even her voice was hoarse and almost inaudible. "I won't like anyone, because I once swore that I won't be moved by anyone." Gong Dai's eyes darkened and his heart ached. He wanted to hold Gong Yimo tightly, but she took a step back and let go of his hand. Gong Yimo looked at him nervously. She did not know if what she was going to do next was right, but seeing how sad Gong Dai was, she wanted to tell him this: "I won't like anyone, but if I really like someone, I think that you will also be you." Chapter 362. What did it feel like to fall from heaven to hell, and then return to heaven from hell? Gong Dai didn't know what heaven and hell were, but his emotions fluctuated wildly. With one sentence from her, he instantly went from being at the bottom of the abyss to being at the top of the clouds. This turn of events made him want to give Gong Yimo a big hug. He wanted to hug her and never let her go. As if she had a premonition that Gong Dai's reaction would be very strong, when Gong Dai couldn't help but laugh, Gong Yimo opened the door and quickly ran away without changing her clothes. Gong Dai wanted to chase after her, but he remembered that he still had makeup on his face. And he was already very happy with this promise. He didn't want to force her to do anything else. Gong Yimo thought as she walked. How could she say something like that? It didn't make sense. She must have been kissed by Gong Dai for too long, causing her brain to lack oxygen. And that must be it. When Gong Yimo arrived at the main hall of the palace, she was still a little surprised. She stood at the door and tidied herself up before walking in. When she went in, she only heard a burst of crying. It was the voice of the old Wang Fei. Then she saw Long Cheng's Ting Shue's face twisted with hatred. At this moment, when she saw her, she actually screamed and wanted to rush over. "It's all your fault. If it wasn't for you, why would Imperial Brother let me marry into Chopper Country? You witch!" She wanted to scratch Gong Yimo's face, but the old consort stopped her. Chopper Country was a small nomadic country vassal to Lu Yi. Its territory was very small, not even 1% of Lu Ye's territory. No wonder Long Qing Ting Shui was unhappy. But what did it have to do with her? She smiled slightly. "You should restrain yourself. If you anger me, the king of Chopper Country won't be able to protect you, that's right. Chopper Country wasn't Lu Yi. It couldn't bear the anger of the princess of Dai Yu State. Her words made the old consort cry even louder. Wu Ji. Look at her. You're pushing your sister into the fire pit. Right now, Dragon City Limitless was already annoyed enough. He knew that Gong Yimo would pick on him like this, but he wanted to kill her before she could repay him. He did not believe her. In fact, with Gong Yimo's character, she would definitely not take revenge after Long Qingting Shui married into a small place like Cole. Because at that time, she would not put Long Qingting Shui in her eyes at all. So even though he hated Long Qingting Shui for doing such a thing, he still made this decision for her own good. If Long Qingting Shui continued to stay, she would once again fall into Gong Yimo's hands. He was afraid that her ending would not be like this. However, they did not understand him. You still have the face to make a scene here. It was the same for the old King Lu Yi. This was an important place in the palace, but he didn't care about his status and shouted loudly. I don't care, my daughter can't marry that kind of person. How could a king who had been chopped be called a king? The last time he brought someone to pay tribute, the old Lu Yi still remembered that it was an ordinary-looking man who was about 30 years old. His daughter was more delicate than flowers, and she was also young. How could she marry that kind of person? The noise continued. Sometimes it was Long Qingting Shui's crying, sometimes it was the old Wang Fei's persuasion, and sometimes it was the old Lu Ye's angry roar. In this noisy environment, Dragon City Limitless suddenly laughed deeply. His laughter grew louder and louder. However, it made everyone shut their mouths and quiet down. There was also a creepy feeling in their hearts. At this moment, Shui Zhan and the others, as well as Gong Yimo, stood there very calmly. However, Long Qingting Shui and the others were not so lucky. Long Qingting Shui suddenly felt a little regretful. She was afraid that with this mess, she would be even more miserable. As expected, after Dragon City Limitless laughed, he stared at her and said coldly, "You don't want to marry? Fine, go cultivate on Poluo Mountain. You choose." The old Lu Yi was stunned. He wanted to say something, but Dragon City Limitless' cold voice sounded. "If you want to go with her to Poluo Mountain, just say it. After all, I, Lu Yi, will not miss out on your offerings." He actually wanted to send his parents to Poluo Mountain. That mountain was filled with devout cultivators. There was nothing there. How were they going to survive there? Dragon City Limitless didn't seem to be joking. This made the old Lu Yi and the old Wang Fei sober up a lot. They revealed a troubled expression. Thinking about it this way, marrying the Chopper King was better than going to Poluo Mountain, right? At least with them there, the Chopper King wouldn't be able to bully his daughter. However, going to Poluo Mountain was equivalent to dying of old age on the mountain. Long Qingting Shui just cried. She didn't expect Dragon City Limitless to be so heartless this time, not giving her any chance. Seeing their silence, Dragon City Limitless asked somewhat cruelly, "Ting Shui, tell me now. Are you going to marry?" "Yes. I'll marry." Long Qingting Shui hurriedly choked out. She was afraid that the angry Dragon City Limitless would change his mind. She was such a sensible person. However, she was very regretful. Back in Lu Yi, the Emperor of Dai Yu State wanted her to choose a husband. At that time, she could have chosen anyone rather than marrying the Chopper King. Unfortunately, it was too late to regret. After sending people to send Long Qingting Shui and the others back to Resht, Dragon City Limitless rubbed his forehead and looked at Gong Yimo. He was regretting it. However, at that time, he was blinded by anger. Moreover, compared to his own people's conspiracy, he was more willing to believe that it was Gong Yimo's doing. However, reality slapped him hard in the face. At the same time, he hated these people and felt even more ashamed. Therefore, he didn't dare to look into Gong Yimo's eyes. He only looked at her and said, "The divine ancestor has important matters to discuss with you. This king is going to take care of other matters." There were still more than 1,000 people who were suspected to be poisoned waiting for him to deal with. Just now, the divine ancestor gave him some holy water. Hopefully, it would be useful. At this time, Gong Yimo finally looked at the so-called divine ancestor. At this time, an old woman walked out from behind him. She was standing there inconspicuously just now. Now that everyone had left, she walked shakily towards Gong Yimo. With her white hair, she gave people the feeling that she had seen the vicissitudes of life. It can't be wrong. She must be Lien Er's child. Cough, cough. After the old woman finished speaking, she coughed a few times. The divine ancestor hurried forward. It seemed that her status was higher than this so-called divine ancestor. Gong Yimo didn't deny it and bowed to her. "May I ask who the two of you are? What business do you have with me?" Hearing this, the old woman's face was suddenly filled with tears. "If you really want to know who I am to you, then you can call me grandmother." This made Gong Yimo somewhat powerless to resist, and she spoke awkwardly. "Where's the proof? How can you prove that you're related to my mother?" The divine ancestor was a little dissatisfied with Gong Yimo's request for proof, but the old woman stopped him and nodded with a smile. "That's exactly what I want from you. That girl Shulian. Sigh. She's too honest. That's why so many things happened later." Chapter 363. Gong Yimo didn't care what she said. She didn't have any feelings for her mother, so naturally, she didn't care about her family. However, if she was really from the Snow Lotus clan, she would help her if she could. "My mother passed away when I was very young, and she didn't say anything special to me before she passed away. So, how can I believe that you are really my grandmother?" She looked like she was in a difficult position. The old woman thought for a while. "Actually, it's not difficult. Our clan has a sacred stone. If you are from the Snow clan, it will definitely light up when you touch it for the first time. How could there be such a magical thing?" Gong Yimo didn't believe it. However, she didn't expect the old woman to really take out a stone. The stone looked completely black. She didn't know what kind of metal it was, but it didn't look like a stone. It wasn't big, only about the length of a finger and the width of half a finger. Seeing the old woman put the stone in her palm, Gong Yimo hesitated. Would it really light up? With that thought in mind, she slowly placed her hand on the black stone. The moment her fingertips touched the strange stone, Gong Yimo felt dizzy. Then, she saw with her own eyes a faint light rise from the stone. She didn't expect it to really light up. She was shocked and quickly moved her hand away. The old woman's face showed that she knew it. She looked deeply at Gong Yimo. The passion in her eyes made Gong Yimo a little overwhelmed. "Finally. I found you. My son's only daughter who is still alive. You're actually still alive, I've finally found you." The holy ancestor Shuizhan comforted her from the side. This scene made Gong Yimo's heart slightly tangled. She had never had any concept of her past. She didn't know if this sudden birth was good or bad. Why didn't it appear in her previous life? After the old woman finished crying, she asked with red eyes, "You are called Gong Yimo, right? How can your surname be Gong? You're from the Snow clan." As she spoke, she actually cried again. "That monarch of Du is the enemy of our Shui clan. Not only did he destroy our country, he even stole your mother. We tried to save her time and time again, but the king of Daiyu State killed every Snow clan member he saw. So we only dared to wander around the other 3 countries, but didn't dare to go to Daiyu State. We didn't know that Lien really didn't kill you, and even gave birth to you. Gong Yimo looked at her crying, and Shuizhan seemed to disagree. It seemed that she should persuade the old lady. Gong Yimo suddenly said after hesitating for a while. Although it seems a little inappropriate to say this, the king of Daiyu State has been very good to me and my mother. I'm not his child, but as the king of a country, he didn't abort me. Although I was banished to the cold palace, he still treated me well after I left the cold palace. Although I'm not that grateful to him, I'm still grateful to him. Therefore, I will never harm him because of the grudges of the previous generation. I hope you can understand this. What did you say? Shuizhan was the first to disagree. You're acknowledging a thief as your father. Gong Yimo frowned even more. If you want to announce to the world that I'm not his child, I can leave Daiyu State. But do you want me to take revenge on him? What a joke. What's the reason? He destroyed Shui country and stole Shuilian, but personally, he didn't hurt me. Gong Yimo said calmly. I think that everyone is an individual. Parents don't necessarily owe their children anything. Similarly, children should be able to distinguish between right and wrong. They shouldn't just listen to what their elders say. They should have their own views of right and wrong, and not follow what others say. You. Shuizhan wanted to say something, but the old lady stopped him. She coughed a few times and sighed. You really think so? From what you said, you should have known your identity when you were very young. Then, even though you were in the cold palace for a few years, you didn't hate him. She lifted her eyelids with great effort, as if she didn't want to miss any expression on Gong Yimo's face. In your heart, did you not hate him? Gong Yimo didn't know why, but she suddenly thought of the grudges in her previous life. Therefore, she said with certainty, no. The old lady suddenly fell silent. At this moment, even Shuizhan fell silent. It was as if they couldn't understand Gong Yimo's words. Suddenly, the old lady laughed softly. She laughed and shook her head, as if she was laughing at herself. Yes. I'm old and confused. You're very good. Generous. My son's child should be so magnanimous. Madam. Shuizhan shouted in a low voice. However, the old lady ignored him. She held Gong Yimo's hand and said softly, You're right. You're right. We shouldn't force you to do anything. My name is Shuiqi, and I'm your grandmother. We haven't helped you much in all these years. So, what do you want to do in the future? Let me see if there's anything I can help you with. She panted as she spoke. Gong Yimo was really afraid that she couldn't take it anymore, so she quickly said, Don't worry. Don't worry, I can solve my own problems. The old lady smiled. You're a good child. You solved Lu Ye's problem as soon as you came. But, what do you want to do next? Seeing that she kept asking, Gong Yimo sighed. Anyway, there was nothing to hide, so she told her directly. I don't want anything else. I just want the world to be peaceful and prosperous for 100 years. Her words stunned the old lady. She couldn't help but look up at Gong Yimo and said, You're a girl. Why? Gong Yimo smiled. We should do what we think is meaningful in this world. Of course, whether it works or not is another matter. Don't take it too seriously. The old lady looked down to hide the complicated emotions in her eyes. After a while, she suddenly put the holy stone in Gong Yimo's hand. Child, this. Take it. Gong Yimo was stunned. Before she could refuse, the old lady said firmly, I'm not very capable. However, after so many years, I've accumulated a lot of connections. Ahem. Although we don't have people in Daiyu State, we have people in the other 3 countries. Now, I'll give it to you. Gong Yimo refused directly. I can't do that. I didn't do anything. I can't take your things for free. However, the old lady's attitude was even more resolute. She looked as if she was ready to die. I'm about to die. It's God's will to give you this thing. If you don't want it, I'll kill myself here. Gong Yimo took the stone in her hand gloomily. Forget it. She would just throw it in her space. She wouldn't use the people of the Shui family. Otherwise, she would owe them a favor. Chapter 364. After sending off the strange old woman and the legendary divine ancestor, Gong Yimo threw their conversation to the back of her mind. She didn't have the slightest intention of reuniting with them. Being alone was the most free, wasn't it? She tried to throw the stone into her space, but she didn't know why. She tried several times, but this strange stone couldn't be put into her space. This surprised Gong Yimo. She could see that the things in her space were still there, but this stone was an exception. She couldn't put it in. She turned the stone in her hand a few times. She guessed that it was something special. Moreover, it represented the Snow Clan. It was the sacred stone of the Snow Clan, so it couldn't be placed anywhere. She simply hung it around her waist. By the time she returned, Gong Ju was already fast asleep on her bed. At this time, he had already washed his face. Probably because he used a lot of strength, his face was slightly red, especially around his eyes. When he was asleep, he looked very harmless. They clearly had the same eyebrows, but the look in his eyes was different. Unexpectedly, it gave her the illusion that they were 2 completely different people. He was really good-looking. When she was a child, Gong Dai would fall asleep, and she would look at him and secretly think. If she had a child in the future, it would be great if he was as beautiful as Gong Dai. Wouldn't it be pleasing to look at him every day? Sitting on the edge of the bed, Gong Yimo suddenly remembered that Gong Dai said that he liked her. He also said that as long as she was willing, he wouldn't have a child. That way, they wouldn't have a deformed child. Gong Yimo gently smiled. How could they have a deformed child? There was no relationship between them at all. In her previous life, she had cut off all ties with the Gong Che family very early on. She even changed her name. Later, it was revealed that she was the child of the original imperial concubine Shui, and her true identity was exposed. Because she had no relationship with Gong Qing and didn't grow up in the palace, when she was together with Gong Che, no one said anything. In her previous life, she wanted to have a passionate love. In the end, it was passionate. It was passionate, but love. Gong Yimo's eyebrows suddenly darkened. She originally wanted to gently stroke Gong Dai's eyebrows, but her hand also paused in midair. She thought that she wasn't afraid of anything, but it turned out that she still had a flaw and a knot in her heart. So Gong Dai thought that there was a blood relationship between them, but only she knew that there was a knot in her heart. She didn't dare to love anyone anymore. She sighed faintly and stopped her hand in midair, not daring to touch his face. In the end, she helplessly withdrew her hand. Poor Gong Dai was usually very alert. But Gong Yimo was the one who was close to him on the bed. Of the journey. And he had been traveling day and night. All day, he just hoping to see his beloved. Of the journey was of the journey. Today, after receiving Gong Yimo's promise, his heart relaxed. Not only did he sleep soundly, but the corners of his lips were slightly raised as if he was having a good dream. Gong Yimo left the room. It was already dark. But she didn't want to sleep with Gong Dai. So she prepared to sleep in another room in the courtyard. But when she left the room, she saw Longqing Wuji standing outside hesitantly. His expression was rarely so complicated. He, who was always straightforward, was actually hesitating at the door for such a long time. Gong Yimo was afraid of waking Gong Dai up, so she signaled Longqing Wuji to go outside. Longqing Wuji had something on his mind. He didn't think that there was a man in her room. He obediently went outside with Gong Yimo. Outside, there was a wide palace road. Huacheng was the only real city in Luyi. The people here only grazed around Huacheng. They farmed and lived here. This city was built by Longqing Wuji. So it was still very young. Around it, there were people who believed in him. But today, something like this happened. There were so many people here. It was impossible to hide it. His sister and fiancé did things like slaughtering people and poisoning people. If he didn't handle it well, it was very likely that the prestige he built up over the years would collapse. It was that easy, that reality. If Huacheng also disbanded and became a place like a market, then Luyi would have no hope of becoming an emperor. So one could imagine how much pain Longqing Wuji was in now. He was clearly high-spirited before, wanting to achieve great things. But in one day, the people close to him gave him a bloody blow. Not only did it crush all his ambitions for the future, it also made the situation that he worked so hard for become precarious. But the first thing he did was to look for her. Gong Yimo secretly shook her head. If it was her, the first thing she would do was to appease the tribe leaders, but what she didn't expect was that this also proved that she had a place in Longqing Wuji's heart. Even if he wanted to kill her during the day. Longqing Wuji didn't stay up late. But now his spirit was dispirited. It was as if he hadn't slept for more than 10 days. He suddenly said something from the past. In the past, we said that when the grass is fertile, we would have a horse race. Since there's no time like the present, let's do it today. Gong Yimo couldn't deny it. Anyway, she was going to leave tomorrow. She didn't want to stay in this place that didn't believe in her. As for Gong Dai, she could leave first. After Gong Dai finished talking, she could catch up with him. Therefore, she nodded her head and decided to gallop on the land of Luyi once. Longqing Wuji quickly ordered people to bring 2 horses. The 2 of them didn't speak a word until they reached the entrance of Huacheng. Longqing Wuji looked into the distance and said, "If we keep going in this direction, we will reach the sacred lake. The sacred lake is especially beautiful at night. Whoever gets there first will win. The loser will have to promise the winner one thing." "How about it?" Gong Yimo agreed. She didn't think that she would lose. Moreover, if Longqing Wuji won, he might apologize for today's matter. So if he really won, she would take it as heavens were telling her not to be calculative. Begin. The 2 horses quickly galloped out. They were both good horses, 1 in 1,000. They were very fast. Gong Yimo felt the summer night's wind blowing through her hair. She raised her head and saw a bright moon hanging in the sky. Even the stars beside it were so eye-catching. Below them was a boundless grassland. In the night wind, the grass bent and stirred up soft and bright waves. The 2 of them shuttled through it as if they were walking on waves. Their goal was the end of the starry sky. This Luyi's night sky was really too beautiful. But when she wasn't paying attention, Longqing Wuji overtook her. It was as if he couldn't see the vast night sky and the bright stars. His eyes only stared ahead, as if he was determined to win. Gong Yimo frowned slightly. Then she focused and chased after him. Longqing Wuji was shocked to find that Gong Yimo's riding skills were not inferior to him, a Luyi man who grew up on horseback. Chapter 365. Naturally, he would not know that Gong Yimo's equestrian archery skills were honed from fighting on the battlefield. He would also not know that in her previous life, the two of them had fought on this grassland. He, the son of the eagle, was not a match for the executioner. But, so what? The wind blew away all the memories. Gong Yimo believed that in this life, killing was already very far away from her. She no longer had to worry that one day she would wake up on the battlefield and sleep with a corpse as her pillow. She, who had a broad mind, seemed to have blended into the wind. She could easily feel Longqing Wuji's impatience, so much so that when he ran in front of her, she could see his furrowed brows. The blow he received today was too big. He was even preparing for his own wedding, but his fiancée did such a thing. Gong Yimo sighed and then slowed down. If he wanted to win, then so be it. Anyway, this Lu Yi would not be her homeland. She was about to leave, so why bother? Suddenly, a magnificent scene like the Milky Way appeared in front of Gong Yimo. In her previous life, she saw the sacred lake in the gray day. At that time, the water of the sacred lake was dyed red with blood. But in this life's night, the sacred lake she saw was like the Milky Way. It was clear and tranquil. In this kind of night, it seemed to gather all the stars, forming a sparkling Milky Way on the ground. You lost. Longqing Wuji's soft voice came. Gong Yimo was slightly stunned and did not regain her senses. At this moment, Longqing Wuji sat on the horse and silently looked at her. His eyebrows relaxed, like a silent mountain. Looking at her like this, Gong Yimo suddenly felt a trace of something called pressure. She casually spread out her hands. If you lost, then you lost. Tell me, what do you want me to do? Longqing Wuji jumped off the horse and extended his hand to her, as if he wanted to help her down the horse. Gong Yimo was stunned for a moment before she jumped down. She felt the slight fragrance of grass on her face. She closed her eyes comfortably and unconsciously took a few steps forward. Is it beautiful? Longqing Wuji's soft voice came from behind her. Here, he seemed to have shed all his sharp edges. He was like a different person compared to the angry person who wanted to kill her in the day. At this time, he pulled out a string of things from his arms. Gong Yi looked at them and found that they were all famous brands, but most of them were made of animal bones. Obviously, these were brands that were made for themselves by the common folk and were not recognized by Lu Yi. But Gong Yimo's sharp eyes saw a silver-branded item. That might be old Chairs. Longqing Wuji stepped forward. In Lu Yi, everyone's origin. Longqing Wuji squatted on the surface of the lake and looked at the clear lake. His heart seemed to have found peace. Those of high status can obtain life medallions here. Even the poor have to bathe here before they can be considered to have a new life. He looked at the nameplate in his hand and smiled. What you call a nameplate is your spoils of war. In Lu Yi, this is our life nameplate. Only those of high status are worthy of it. Once I was born, the elders of the clan would take my hair to the sacred ancestor. He would use our first strand of hair to make a life tablet that belongs to us. It can't be lost, it's one of a kind. That's why we all started from here, bathing in the first drop of water in the world. At this moment, Longqing Wuji's voice gradually lowered as he sighed. And this is also the place where life ends. When I die, my life tablet will sink to the bottom of the lake as if it had never appeared. The only thing that proves that it was here will eventually return to the lake. Don't you think it's not worth it? He threw all the name tags in his hand into the water and stirred the water. Gong Yimo then realized that Lu Ye's name tags really glowed in the water. In other words, the dazzling starlight in the lake was not a projection of the stars, but the shining nameplates in the water. This realization made Gong Yimo slightly shocked. In this lake, who knew how many lives were hidden? Years and years of accumulation, their life's glory would finally gather here. Heroic, but short. Wasn't it not worth it? She thought of what Long Ching Wuji asked her. Long Ching Wuji looked at the lake and smiled. So when I was young, when I threw the Elder's life tablets into the lake, I thought that I must create a great achievement. So that in my short life, I would not sink into the lake, but always shine. I would live in the hearts of the future generations, and pass it down generation after generation. That feeling was as if I had not only lived for a few decades, but always lived, forever living like this. Gong Yimo did not know why, but from his tone, she could hear a trace of sadness. At this moment, he had already stood up, and turned to look at Gong Yimo, and actually smiled slightly. With this thought, I always thought that my body did not belong to me. I am Lu Ye's king, so my body, consciousness, everything about me, belongs to Lu Yi, to the sky, to the people, but not to myself. What I want, must be what Lu Yi wants, what Lu Yi needs, is what I should do. Gong Yimo sighed, and said in a helpless tone, forget it, forget it. Don't say any more, I'm not angry with you anymore. Your situation back then. I also understand, so don't say any more. She also had this kind of heavy dream, it made people happy, but also painful, so she did not want to listen to it anymore. Long Ching Wuji suddenly could not help but laugh. Today, I did my best to win you, even if it cost my life, not to beg for your forgiveness. Gong Yimo was angry, and stared at him. She was still angry. This person actually did not want to beg for mercy. Long Ching Wuji looked at her. That pair of beautiful eyes, even in this kind of night, he could see a wisp of moving blue. His voice had always been calm and heavy, but at this time, it unexpectedly had a bit of a clear and cold feeling that his age should have. He said, I hope that you can stay in Lu Yi. Gong Yimo was shocked, but before she could say anything, he had already revealed his most brilliant smile since they had known each other. Those pure white teeth and slightly shining eyes softened all the corners of his face. I want to have you, this is my selfish desire, but I have my responsibilities and mission, so I can't do that. The one I should marry is Lu Ye's goddess. But today, I suddenly want to be selfish for once. I want you because I'm happy when I think of you. It has nothing to do with any benefits. It's just the true desire in my heart. It's like riding a horse in the night. My eyes can't see anything. I can only see you. Chapter 366. Gong Yimo regains her senses and shakes her head. What kind of reversal is this? She doesn't want to play with him anymore. But when she turns around, Long Ching Wuji reaches out and grabs hold of her. He stops smiling and says seriously, I want you to stay and abandon Dai Yute State's emotional entanglements that don't belong to you. I want you to be the freest eagle in the grassland with me. I have a feeling that this is the life that suits you. Lu Yi may not be as rich as Dai Yute State, but Lu Yi is very simple. The reason why I like you is also very simple. Don't you think that you are more suited to this grassland, to this sky? Am I more suited to you? Gong Yimo retracts her hand as if she got an electric shock. She steps back. How are you suited to me? You even wanted to kill me during the day. Gong Yimo tries to push the grudge between the two. And Hua Zhou Wu Yu. She is your wife. Not anymore. Longqing Wuji suddenly says, today, the divine ancestor came and said that she will be sentenced to death. She will use her death to comfort those who died. To redeem her sins. And when he thinks about how Hua Zhou Wu Yu dared to kill the Chair clan, the anger in his body could not be suppressed no matter what. He can't wait to tear her to shreds. That won't do. Gong Yimo rejects righteously. How could Wu Yu die just like that? This is too strange. She frowns as she thinks. I still have a lot of things to do. I will not get married, and I will not stay in Lu Yi. Longqing Wuji doesn't seem to care. It's okay. I will wait for you. After you finish what you want to do, I will marry you. Or you can marry me first, and we can do what you want to do together. Gong Yimo feels that this person is really stubborn. She has to be ruthless. I already have someone I like. Who? Longqing Wuji raises his eyebrows. Gong Dai. Gong Yimo nodded fiercely. Since Gong Dai was sleeping, she was not afraid that he would hear. He treats me very well. I like him very much. If I want to marry, I'm willing to marry him. Longqing Wuji's eyes darkened, but you are brother and sister. The Emperor of Dai Yu State won't agree. So, I still have a chance. He said these words with great difficulty. Suddenly, he frowned and sighed. Can you not reject me? This is the first time in my life that I want to pursue something that I like. You are the first person that I like. Why is it that even Gong Dai can do it but not me? You have no chance. Gong Dai's voice suddenly sounded, causing Gong Yimo's back to stiffen. She didn't even dare to look back. She didn't dare to think about when Gong Dai had appeared there. In the end, she still turned around. When she turned around, she saw Gong Dai standing there, panting slightly. However, his eyes were clear and there was no anger. Instead, he stepped forward possessively and protected Gong Yimo behind him. He said to Longqing Wuji word by word. Royal sister is mine. She has been mine since she was 7 years old. He stood in front of Gong Yimo and looked coldly at Longqing Wuji. He wanted to tear him apart, so, you better not have any wishful thinking. She doesn't belong to you, and definitely doesn't belong to Lu Yi. At that moment, Longqing Wuji's immature aura disappeared. The calm and domineering King Lu Yi returned. He narrowed his deep eyes and looked at Gong Dai with undisguised murderous intent. You can't keep her. She is an eagle, not a house sparrow in Dai Yu State. Gong Dai looked at him coldly. He didn't back down at all. It's still better than you, Lu Yi. You have nothing. You. Longqing Wuji was like a tiger whose whiskers had been plucked. He glared at Gong Dai and wanted to fight him. You are the one who is wishful thinking. She has done so much for you. You should be grateful. Not let her fall into incestuousness and be in a dilemma. This was the most painful thorn in Gong Dai's heart. His body suddenly exploded with a murderous aura. Gong Yimo, who was behind him, was scared and wanted to retreat. She is my woman. Anyone who wants to snatch her away, I will not let them off. Longqing Wuji had already taken up his stance. He stared at Gong Dai like a beast staring at its prey. Then let's fight. In the grasslands, only the strong can capture a woman's heart. Gong Dai's murderous aura could not be suppressed. Gong Yimo felt that Longqing Wuji was already very pitiful today. She hoped that Gong Dai would not be too ruthless. However, when she pulled on Gong Dai's sleeve, he turned around and hugged her. He gave her a fierce kiss. You always cause trouble when I'm not paying attention. Royal sister, I will deal with you later. His eyes were filled with a certain kind of heat. Gong Yimo did not dare to say anything. She stood there in a daze. Longqing Wuji had already rushed over angrily. Gong Dai was also happy to fight. He had been unhappy with Longqing Wuji for a long time. Seeing the two of them fighting because of a disagreement, Gong Yimo wanted to cry. What was going on? Why couldn't they just talk things out? The two of them did not use any weapons. They were fighting barehanded. It was more like they were venting their anger. Gong Dai, how old are you? Can you guarantee that you will not fall in love with someone else in the future? When the time comes, what will she do? Gong Dai directly punched his face and sneered, "You are very good. Your fiancé is just about to be executed and you can't wait to find another woman. Is someone like you very reliable?" In terms of poisonous tongue, Gong Dai was almost invincible. Longqing Wuji was about to explode in anger. When he mentioned Flower Boat Wuyo, he remembered what happened today. Then, he vented all his anger on Gong Dai. He swung his palm. Because of his innate strength, Gong Dai retreated a few steps. His blood and qi were in turmoil. He exerted force on his feet and stopped his body from retreating. Looking at Longqing Wuji, his eyes surged and he fiercely counterattacked. "You are a despicable person. Other than taking advantage of her soft-heartedness and her past feelings, do you dare to use your strength to conquer her?" Longqing Wuji took a punch from Gong Dai and retreated a few steps. He almost vomited blood. However, he held it in and gritted his teeth. Gong Dai stood there looking at him with disdain. A person who can't even take care of a woman's little sister has no right to say such words. Royal sister said that you should cultivate yourself and take care of the family. You have not done a single thing well. Ah! Damn it! I will kill you. Longqing Wuji's eyes instantly turned red. Hang! Gong Dai sneered. He clenched his fist and was ready to give him a quick death. Enough! Gong Yimo's face was gloomy. She held her forehead with one hand and angrily shouted. Hearing that she was angry, the two of them stopped. However, although Longqing Wuji's strength was great, he was not Gong Dai's opponent. In the end, he was knocked down to the ground by Gong Dai. He felt that he had been humiliated. He looked at Gong Dai and wished he could cut him into pieces. What are you guys doing? Gong Yimo first stared at Gong Dai and used her finger to poke his chest. Did you forget why you came to Luyi? He is the king of Luyi. You really hit him. Gong Dai looked at Gong Yimo with a fierce gaze. Royal sister was attracting love again. He had not been pacified yet. You're tuning in to the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.